What does death feel like? Lu Yui knew the answer now. It was cold, a bone-deep cold, as if even his soul would freeze into shards of ice. The 5th year of the apocalypse, winter. The global average temperature had settled steadily at -80 degrees Celsius. Once bustling metropolises had long turned into silent ice sculptures. He huddled inside a ventilation duct on the 30th floor of an abandoned office building, the last safe haven he'd found in this frozen hell. Beneath his tattered cotton coat, he clung with his last ounce of strength to half a brick-hard high-energy compressed biscuit tucked against his chest. He'd traded the last batch of antibiotics from their entire camp for it. This biscuit was his lifeline for the next 7 days. Shhh. A faint scraping sound echoed outside the duct. Lu Yui stiffened, holding his breath completely. In this dead city, every noise spelled certain death. Yuri! Lu Yuri! Are you in there? A familiar voice rang out, laced with urgency. It was Hao. Right after, another female voice etched deep in his heart followed. Yuri, it's Xiao Jia. Say something. We've searched everywhere for you. It was them. The taut tension coiled inside Lu Yui unraveled at once, hot tears stinging his eyes. He thought they were long gone. Staggering, he pushed open the rusted duct grill with numb, frostbitten hands and called out weakly, Hao. Xiao Jia. I'm here. Moments later, 2 figures appeared at the duct opening. They looked far better off than him. Though wrapped in thick winter layers, color still lingered in their cheeks, and they moved with far more vigor. Hao jumped down first, catching Lu Yuri as he swayed unsteadily on his feet, his tone bright with the joy of reunion. Thank God you're alive. We thought those cleaners had gotten you. Xiao Jia climbed down next. Her eyes reddened at the sight of his ashen, paper-pale face, her voice cracking with emotion. Yuri, look at the state you're in. We found a new shelter with steady heat. Come with us, please. Relief washed over Lu Yui, overwhelmed by the miracle of surviving another day. He nodded hard, his lips trembling too much to speak from sheer excitement. By the way, do you have any food? We haven't eaten in 2 whole days. Hao's gaze drifted casually to the bulging front of Lu Yui's coat, his question sounding offhand. Lu Yui froze, instinctively hugging the biscuit tighter to his chest. Xiao Jia's eyes locked onto the lump as well, her tone shifting into an unsettling weight of moral pressure. Yuri, you wouldn't hide food from us, would you? We're family, what's there to keep to yourself? The word family pricked Lu Yui like a needle. He stared at Xiao Jia, the face he'd once ached for endlessly, then glanced at Hao, his best friend, and a bitter absurdity welled up inside him. His throat raw and hoarse, he spoke. I traded our last medicine for this. This is my only. Yours? Does that mean it isn't ours too? Hao cut him off, the smile fading from his face, replaced by sharp impatience. Don't be so selfish, Yui. We're a team, supplies are meant to be shared. Hand it over. If we split it 3 ways, none of us starve alone. Split it. A hollow, bitter laugh escaped Lu Yui. How? This half-biscuit is barely enough for 1 person to last 2 days. If we divide it, none of us will live through this week. It's better than starving right this second. Hao's voice turned harsh and demanding. Quit stalling and give it to me. Lu Yui's heart sank inch by inch. He looked at the 2 people he'd trusted most, and all trace of reunion joy had vanished from their eyes. Only raw, naked greed for food remained. What if I refuse? He forced the words out from the bottom of his lungs, draining every last scrap of his strength. Xiao Jia sighed and stepped forward, her soft tone chillingly menacing. Yuri, why make this hard? You've always been too weak to survive in a world like this. Give us the food, and it'll be your final favor to us. We'll remember what you did for us. A favor? Lu Yui let out a laugh that devolved into hacking coughs. Tears streaked down his cheeks, freezing into tiny ice beads the moment they touched the frigid air. So you tracked me down from the very start just for this? Hao lost all remaining patience. He pulled a sharpened steel rebar from behind his back, his eyes twisting into a vicious, unrecognizable glare. Don't be stubborn and force our hand. Lu Yui, this is your last chance. Hand over the biscuit. Lu Yui slowly straightened up, staring at them in utter despair as he saw just how foolish he'd been for the past 5 years. He pulled the biscuit out from his coat and held it out before them. The instant greedy light flared in both Hao and Xiao Jia's eyes. Lu Yui hurled the biscuit deep into the narrow duct. Over my dead body. He roared with his last breath. You're asking to die. Rage blazing in his eyes, Hao lunged forward without hesitation, driving the sharp steel rebar hard through Lu Yui's back. Squelch. Lu Yui's body jolted violently. He stared down in disbelief, watching the cold metal rod pierce straight through his chest. Warm blood gushed out, congealing the second it hit the freezing air. His strength drained away like receding tides, and he crumpled forward to his knees. Hao shoved him roughly aside and scrambled to retrieve the half-biscuit. Xiao Jia walked slowly over to Lu Yuyi and knelt beside him. She watched his vision blur and his pupils dilate, no flicker of guilt on her face, only a quiet, relieved calm. "Thank you for your sacrifice, Yuyi," she whispered. "Don't be so naive in your next life." In his final moments, Lu Yuyi's consciousness drowned in endless darkness and crushing regret. He felt the ancient bronze coin he wore around his neck, a family heirloom, soak in his spilling blood and grow scorchingly hot. A faint, fleeting flash of crimson light flickered out right before he lost consciousness entirely. Buzz. A deafening ring in his ears jolted Lu Yuyi's eyes wide open. He shot upright in bed, gasping for air, the searing pain in his chest still vividly real. Yet the bone-chilling cold he'd expected never came. Instead, long-forgotten warmth wrapped around him. Sunlight seeped through gaps in the curtains, dappling the wooden floor with golden spots. Outside, car horns and the bustle of crowds drifted through the window. This wasn't the apocalypse. Lu Yuyi stumbled to the mirror. The man staring back looked utterly horrified, but his skin glowed with healthy color, unmarred by a single wound on his chest. Hands shaking violently, he grabbed his phone off the nightstand. The screen lit up, displaying a date burned permanently into his memory. September 28th, 2325. 3 full months remained until the solar flu that would engulf the entire globe erupted. A surge of wild elation crashed over him, only to be swallowed a heartbeat later by icy, soul-deep hatred. "How? Xiao Jia." Lu Yuyi stared at his reflection, slowly curving his lips into a grin far more ferocious than any demon's. "I'm back." Inside his rental apartment, Lu Yuyi sat on the edge of the bed, forcing himself to calm the raging tide of hatred in his chest. Revenge could wait. His vengeance had already begun back in the frozen wasteland, when Hao and Xiao Jia fought over half a biscuit to stay alive. Right now, he had far more critical work ahead. He opened his phone's memo app, and beneath the headings Funds, Supplies, Fortress, Survive, he rapidly scribbled a sprawling shopping list. Food, medicine, energy sources, weapons, tools. The list grew longer by the second, and one harsh reality stared him down: money. Glancing at his bank balance, barely 60,000 yuan, he knew it was nothing but a drop in the bucket against the coming end of the world catastrophe. A thought flashed through his mind, heavy with the remorse and agony of his past life. The old downtown house his parents had left him. In his previous life, he'd clung to it as the last tangible memory of his folks and refused to sell it no matter what. But once the apocalypse hit, reinforced concrete buildings turned to worthless scrap metal under -80-degree temperatures. A memory? In the end times, the only memory that matters is staying alive. Lu Yuyi let out a self-deprecating laugh, every trace of hesitation vanishing from his eyes. He changed into clean clothes, pulled on a baseball cap and face mask, and headed straight for the real estate agency closest to his rental. A young agent named Zhang greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, sir. Are you looking to rent or purchase a property?" "I'm selling," Lu Yuyi replied, his voice utterly flat and emotionless. He was led to the lounge area, and Zhang handed him a glass of water with a smile. "May I ask where your property is and its square footage? We can give you an initial valuation." Lu Yuyi left the water untouched, pulling a copy of the property deed from his bag and sliding it across the table. "Splendid Huiting, downtown. 120 square meters, prime floor." Zhang's eyes lit up instantly. This was an extremely sought-after unit, guaranteed to sell fast, with steadily rising market value. "Sir, this location is premium. The current market rate is at least 150,000 yuan per square meter, and prices are still climbing. If you're serious about selling, I'll guarantee you top dollar." "I don't care about the final sale price," Lu Yuyi cut him off. Zhang blinked in shock. "Pardon?" Lu Yuyi leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp as a blade even through his mask. "I only care how quickly I receive the full payment. One condition: the entire sum must hit my account within 7 days. 7 days? Full cash offer." Zhang thought he'd misheard, forcing an awkward chuckle. "Sir, you can't be serious. For a property of this value, even if a buyer falls in love with it, paperwork and mortgage approvals take a minimum of 1 to 2 months. Then slash the price, Liu Yi said, his tone leaving no room for argument. How much of a discount? 15% off the market price. 15% off? Zhang shot straight up off the sofa, his voice cracking. That meant a direct price cut of over 2 million yuan. This wasn't a discount, it was a fire sale. He eyed Liu Yi, confused and suspicious, and asked cautiously, Sir, did something urgent happen? There's no need to rush this property so drastically. That's my business, none of yours, Liu Yi interrupted coldly once more. Just tell me, can you meet my terms? Yes, absolutely. Zhang's face flushed with excitement. A deal this good was a once-in-a-lifetime windfall. Forget 7 days, he was confident he could find a cash buyer within 3. If he closed this sale, his commission would cover the down payment for a suburban apartment outright. Get it done, Liu Yi stood up. Bring any potential buyer straight to sign the contract. I have no time to waste on property viewings. With that, he left his phone number and walked out, leaving Agent Zhang reeling from shock and elation. The next 3 days passed in eerie quiet for Liu Yi. He locked himself inside his rental, refining his stockpile list down to the tiniest, most meticulous details. On the 4th day, Zhang called, his tone brimming with unprecedented excitement and deference. Mr. Liu, I've found a buyer. A business owner who loves the property and has no issues with your price. When would you be free to sign the contract right away? Now. The signing process moved at an incredible speed. Liu Yi spoke only in short, concise sentences, raising no objections to any clause. His sole focus was the payment timeline. The buyer was equally stunned by his unusually laid-back attitude as a seller and signed the papers on the spot. 3 more days passed. Liu Yi was drafting renovation blueprints for his safe house when the crisp chime of an incoming text cut through the quiet. He picked up his phone and opened the message. China Construction Bank, a deposit transaction of 15 million renminbi has been credited to your debit card ending in XXXX at 1532 on September 28th. Current demand deposit balance, 15,068,345 renminbi and 50 cents. Staring at the cold string of digits, Liu Yi slowly exhaled a long breath. This was the first and sturdiest cornerstone of his reclaimed fate. He unlocked his screen, found the WeChat profile labeled Supervisor Zhang, someone he barely spoke to, and typed a calm message. I won 100 million yuan in the lottery. I'm quitting to travel the world. The message sent successfully. In the next second, he blocked his supervisor without hesitation, then exited every workgroup chat. The old Liu Yi, the diligent corporate drone who bit his tongue for a meager monthly salary, died completely at this moment. Once finished, he stepped out of his rental flat and hailed a taxi. Driver, take me to the largest warehousing and logistics park on the outskirts. The suburban logistics park sprawled across a vast tract of land, rows of towering blue metal warehouses gleaming spectacularly under the sun. Liu Yi stood before Warehouse Bing 7, the unit he had leased. It was the park's largest and most isolated storage space, spanning thousands of square meters, spacious enough for full-size container trucks to drive straight inside. Under the name of Tianong Trading, a shell company he'd just registered, he paid half a year's rent up front in full. Echoes bounced off the empty warehouse walls, yet Liu Yi's gaze held no confusion, only the laser focus of a hunter locking onto its prey. His first stop was the city's largest grain and oil wholesale market. This place fed the entire metropolis. Hundreds of tons of grain flowed from its stalls to households every single day. 3 months from now, it would devolve into a blood-soaked battlefield, where men would kill one another over a sack of rice or a jug of cooking oil. Behind the wheel of a second-hand pickup truck he'd rented, Liu Yi headed straight for the market management office and asked to see Wang Dehai, the biggest grain and oil wholesaler in the district. He met the man in a smoke-choked office, the supplier who controlled half the city's grain and oil supply chain. Around 50 years old, Wang Dehai sported a prominent beer belly and an ostentatious gold ring on one finger, slouched back in his chair with one leg crossed over the other, sipping tea. He glanced Liu Yi up and down in plain, unremarkable clothes, his tone lazy and dismissive. Young man, what can I do for you? If you're buying small quantities, head to the stalls downstairs. I don't handle retail clients here. Liu Yi wasted no pleasantries. He pulled out the chair opposite Wang and slid a printed list across the desk. Boss Wang, I'm Liu Yi, purchasing manager for Tianong Trading. I need everything on this list. Wang Dehai picked up the paper, initially uninterested, but his beady eyes flew wide as he scanned the product names and quantities. 500 tons of rice, 500 tons of flour. He looked up at Lu Yui as if staring at a lunatic, slamming the list onto the table with a scoff. Kid, are you here to waste my time? Do you even grasp what 500 tons of rice means? That's enough to feed an entire residential complex of 10,000 people for a full year. Tianfeng trading? I've never heard of it in my life. Lu Yui's expression remained unruffled, meeting the man's mocking gaze steadily. That's exactly why I came to you, Boss Wang. I know you're the only supplier in this whole market capable of sourcing such a massive order in a short window. His unshakable composure dulled the sneer on Wang Dehai's face, and he reassessed the young man before him. Squinting, he probed cautiously. Are you restocking for some newly opened large supermarket chain? Or are you handling government strategic reserve procurement? That information doesn't concern you, Boss Wang. Lu Yui leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying unyielding resolve. Just tell me, can you gather all these goods and deliver them to my designated warehouse within 3 days? 3 days? Wang Dehai let out a thunderous laugh that rattled the office windows. You've got quite the lofty tongue, young man. Putting aside whether I can source it all, could you even afford to take delivery? The total value of this order tops 5 million yuan minimum. Can you pay that sum? This was the real crux of the matter. Lu Yui abandoned verbal sparring. Silently, he pulled 2 documents from his bag and laid them on the desk. The first was Tianong Trading's business license and corporate seal. The second was a bank-issued corporate account credit certificate he'd printed that morning, stamped officially by the bank. It displayed a staggering available balance, 15 million yuan, clear as day. Wang Dehai's laughter died instantly. His eyes glued themselves to the certificate, counting the endless string of zeros over and over, the flesh on his cheeks trembling from sheer shock. A deathly silence fell over the office. After a long pause, Wang Dehai swallowed hard. The way he looked at Lu Yui had completely shifted, all arrogance and laziness vanished, replaced by the sharp, eager calculation unique to seasoned businessmen. Mr. Lu. He slipped into an honorific unconsciously, his tone suddenly deferential. What brings you to place such an enormous order? I told you, I'm here to conduct business. Lu Yui retrieved the certificate. Boss Wang, shall we discuss the details now? Absolutely, without a doubt. Wang Dehai scrambled to his feet, refilling Lu Yui's teacup with boiling hot water, plastering a wide grin across his face. Please take a seat, Mr. Lu. I've underestimated you completely. For an order of this scale, I'll work day and night without sleep to get it ready within 3 days. Price will follow standard wholesale market rates, Lu Yui said flatly. No problem. I'll give you our absolute bottom price. The quality must be top grade, this year's newly harvested rice, no old grain mixed in whatsoever. You have my full assurance. Honesty is the foundation of my business, Mr. Lu. Everything will be prepared perfectly for you. Lu Yui nodded and pulled out his phone. I can transfer half the deposit to you right now, 2.5 million yuan. The remaining balance will be paid in full once the goods arrive at my warehouse and pass inspection. Any issues with these terms? None at all, completely acceptable. Wang Dehai rubbed his hands together excitedly. A deposit of 2.5 million meant the deal was all but sealed. He felt as if a giant gold ingot had dropped straight into his lap. Seconds later, Lu Yui tapped his phone screen, and the huge sum landed in Wang Dehai's bank account. Glancing at the transaction alert on his own phone, Wang Dehai's grin stretched from ear to ear. He personally walked Lu Yui to the office doorway, shaking his hand warmly. Mr. Lu, wait for my good news. I'll arrange everything immediately. Your shipment won't be delayed by a single minute. Leaving the grain and oil market, Lu Yui wasted no time, driving straight to the opposite side of the city, its largest frozen food processing base. Using the same decisive, no-nonsense approach, he met with the managers of multiple meatpacking plants and seafood companies. Directorly, I represent Tianfeng Trading. I need 300 tons of frozen pork, 100 tons of beef, 100 tons of mutton. Payment is no issue, my only demand is speed. Manager Zhao, I'll buy out every last stock of frozen chicken, duck, goose, hairtail, and yellow croaker your company has. Yes, all of it, you heard correctly. Sign the contract now and I'll transfer the deposit instantly. Faced with unlimited capital, all tedious formalities were cut down to the bare minimum. For the next 2 days, Warehouse Bing 7 on the outskirts buzzed with relentless activity. Heavy-duty trucks rolled into the logistics park one after another, dropping mountains of supplies inside the warehouse as security guards and porters watched in stunned disbelief. Good heavens, who exactly is Tianfeng trading? Are they trying to empty every grain store in the city? Yesterday we unloaded rice and flour nonstop all day, and today it's frozen meat. Those rock-hard pork blocks are stacked into towering mounds. This is madness, pure madness. Late at night, 2 days later, the final truck pulled away, and silence swallowed the entire park. Lu Yui stood alone in the center of Warehouse Bing 7. He slowly pulled shut the massive iron gate and bolted it from the inside. Beneath a handful of solitary overhead lamps, mountains of grain, meat, and cooking oil filled the warehouse, forming an awe-inspiring ocean of supplies. In the apocalypse, these goods would be 10,000 times more precious than gold. They were lifelines. Standing before the towering stockpiles, Lu Yui slowly closed his eyes. A single thought flickered through his mind. When he opened his eyes a split second later, the vast sea of supplies that could drive any survivor insane had vanished without a trace. The warehouse stood empty once more, just as it had when he first rented it. Within the mental space he commanded, a massive storage chamber spanning 1,000,000 cubic meters now held all the provisions neatly stacked in one corner, emanating a comforting sense of security. Lu Yui exhaled slowly. For the first time since his rebirth, he felt a genuine, tangible sense of safety. And this was only the beginning. Having cleared all grain and meat stock from the warehouse into his personal space, Lu Yui did not let his guard down for a moment. He knew hunger was far from the only killer in the end times. Disease, bitter cold, and despair would claim countless more lives. His second round of purchasing targeted goods commonplace in peacetime, yet priceless once the world collapsed. His first destination, the city's largest pharmaceutical wholesale center. Still operating under the Tianfeng trading banner, he met the center's sales manager, a shrewd middle-aged man wearing wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Liu, a pleasure to meet you." The manager handed over his business card politely. "What pharmaceuticals does your company wish to procure?" "Our inventory covers every category imaginable." Lu Yui slid a fresh list across the table. "I need all of this in massive bulk, and I need it fast." The manager scanned the paper with an easy smile at first, but his grin froze instantly. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper, his courteous expression morphing into thick confusion and wariness. "Mr. Liu, if I may speak frankly, this order strikes me as odd." He adjusted his glasses, his tone turning serious. "Vast quantities of antibiotics, cephalexin, amoxicillin, hundreds of cartons of iodophor, gauze, and bandages. On top of that, you've requested huge stockpiles of multivitamins, calcium tablets, and anti-inflammatory drugs. This is nothing like standard corporate procurement. It reads more like battlefield medical reserves for an entire army." Lu Yui watched him calmly, having anticipated this exact line of questioning. He pulled a forged document from his bag, stamped with a cheap homemade rubber seal bearing the Tianfeng trading name. "Manager Zhang, our firm recently landed a major project." He lied smoothly without a flicker of hesitation. "We supply logistical support for an ocean-going fleet embarking on a 3-year deep-sea mineral exploration mission across the South Pacific. Conditions at sea are brutal, and medical resupply is nearly impossible, hence the massive one-time order. This is a copy of our project approval documentation." Manager Zhang accepted the file skeptically. Its jargon and official-looking stamp lent it a convincing air. "Deep-sea mineral exploration?" he muttered to himself. "Precisely," Lu Yui pressed on. "As you well know, sailors face constant risk of injury and infection out at sea, plus vitamin deficiencies from long stretches without fresh produce. Our order reflects genuine operational needs. Naturally, I understand your concerns, but..." He shifted forward, lowering his voice, the edge of persuasion sharp in his tone. "We are a fully registered legitimate enterprise, and every cent of payment will arrive on schedule. The total cost for these pharmaceuticals is roughly 800,000 yuan, and I can transfer a 500,000 deposit upfront. Will you take this order or pass it up?" The blatant lure of enormous profit instantly crushed the last flicker of doubt lingering in Manager Zhang's mind. Risk? What risk could outweigh hundreds of thousands in guaranteed profit? "We'll take it, absolutely." The manager's warm smile returned in full force. "Rest assured, Mr. Liu. I'll arrange all inventory immediately and deliver it to your warehouse at top speed." With pharmaceuticals secured, Lu Yui set his sights on energy supplies and tools next. He drove to the hardware and construction materials market on the outskirts, a paradise stocked with every tool and piece of machinery imaginable. He walked straight into the largest shop specializing in power generators, where a burly shopkeeper polished a brand new diesel generator. "Shopkeeper, I'll take 10 of your highest wattage diesel generators." Lu Yui dropped his request without preamble. The shopkeeper paused his polishing, staring at him in shock. "Young man, you can't be serious. These are 200 kilowatt heavy-duty units. One alone can power an entire small residential block. What do you need 10 for? Are you opening a factory?" "I own a private manor, and I'm installing an independent off-grid power system for emergencies." Lu Yui recited the cover story he'd prepared long beforehand. "Wow, a manor owner." The shopkeeper perked up with interest. "Generators alone won't cut it, though. These beasts guzzle dozens of liters of diesel every hour. They're fuel hogs." "That's why I need diesel as well," Lu Yui said evenly. "Can you put me in touch with an oil depot? I require 200 tons. 200 tons? The shopkeeper's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. He cupped a hand to his ear, convinced he'd misheard. "That's correct, 200 tons, Lu Yui repeated. The shopkeeper was thoroughly stunned. He stared blankly at Lu Yui for a long moment before stammering, "Brother, no sir. You're planning something massive. I know the depot's director personally. I'll connect you right away and lock in the lowest possible price for you." Over the following days, Lu Yui swept through the entire hardware market and outdoor gear store district like a storm. Top-tier cold-proof parkas, entrenching shovels, fire axes, high-tensile rope, solar charging panels, portable water filters. He cleared the full inventory of multiple retailers. He also ordered vast quantities of steel, cement, and anti-intrusion security fittings, preparing to renovate his ultimate safe house to withstand end-times conditions. Most critical of all were weapons. Firearms were nearly impossible to acquire under China's strict weapons control regulations, but Lu Yui had a backup plan. He visited a professional archery club and placed an order under the pretext of a company team building event: 20 top-grade compound bows and tens of thousands of alloy-piercing arrows. In the early days of the apocalypse, these silent weapons would prove deadlier than handguns in many scenarios. On this day, as Lu Yui stepped out of a luxury shopping mall, he caught sight of two faces that filled him with burning hatred. Hao and Xiao Jia. They leaned intimately against one another before a jewelry store window. A sparkling diamond ring glinted on Xiao Jia's finger, her face glowing with bliss. "Darling, look how beautiful this ring is." "Thank you so much." Xiao Jia's sugary, cloying voice carried across the walkway. "Silly girl, as long as you love it," Hao murmured fondly, tapping the tip of her nose. "Once we get back from our honeymoon, we'll go take wedding photos. Let's visit that newly opened Nordic-style mountain town. They say the snow scenery there is breathtaking." Snow scenery. Lu Yui stood a short distance away, his baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He watched the loathsome pair in silence, no twinge of pain stirring in his heart, only frigid, hollow numbness. In his past life, he'd scraped by, scrimping every penny, dreaming of giving Xiao Jia the wedding she'd always wanted. All he received in return was betrayal in the frozen apocalypse, murdered by the two people he trusted most, dying with unspoken grievances weighing on his soul. Now they were plotting their perfect future with money swindled from his late parents. At that moment, Hao seemed to sense a gaze and glanced casually sideways, spotting Lu Yui standing nearby. "Huh? Isn't that Yui?" Hao blinked in surprise, then tugged Xiao Jia over, a mocking smirk playing on his lips. "Hey Lu Yui, you're full of surprises. I heard you won 100 million and quit your job to travel the world. What are you still doing hanging around here?" Xiao Jia laid eyes on Lu Yui too. A flicker of unguarded guilt crossed her features, quickly replaced by smug superiority. Linking her arm through Hao's, she feigned concern. "Yuri, how have you been lately? You look like you've lost a little weight." Lu Yui slowly lifted his head. Beneath the brim of his cap, his eyes resembled a still, frigid lake with unfathomable depths, devoid of any emotion or ripple. He ignored Hao's jeers and brushed off Xiao Jia's fake solicitude, sweeping a cold glance over the two of them once. His stare carried no warmth whatsoever. He did not look upon a former friend and former lover, rather, two stray stones by the roadside, or two corpses soon to turn cold. "I have somewhere to be." Those 4 words were all he said as he walked past them, never glancing back a second time. Hao and Xiao Jia froze where they stood. They were stunned by his utter indifference, the way he acted as if they did not exist. What's gotten into him? Xiao Jia tugged nervously at Hao's sleeve. He feels like a completely different person. Who cares? Hao snapped out of his daze, curling his lip in disdain. Probably blew through all that lottery money and fell back to being a broke corporate drone. Putting on some mysterious act for show. Come on, honey, let's ignore him and go look at wedding dresses. Lu Yui exited the mall, glancing back at the brightly lit, bustling building behind him. He knew this fleeting prosperity was counting down to its end. As for himself, he was fully prepared for the brutal frozen winter fast approaching. Only 2 months remained until the outbreak of the solar flu. 90% of Lu Yui's procurement plan was complete. He still held roughly 5 million yuan in capital, all of which he intended to pour into building his ultimate safe haven. He had no interest in towering downtown high-rises; those would only become vertical tombs encased in ice and despair once the apocalypse arrived. Instead, he set his sights on a remote suburban villa district on the far edge of the city, a development project abandoned a decade ago, now sparsely populated. He soon settled on a standalone villa. It sat on a sprawling plot of land with a basement spanning over 300 square meters, a private courtyard enclosed by tall perimeter walls, and an isolated location with barely any residents for kilometers around. This would be his personal ark. He paid the full asking price for the villa with his remaining funds and immediately hired the most professional construction renovation firm in the area. The project manager, Manager Liu, a seasoned middle-aged man, was utterly dumbfounded the moment he laid eyes on Lu Yui's architectural blueprints. Mr. Liu, Manager Liu adjusted his safety helmet, his face etched with total confusion. Are you absolutely certain you want to renovate it like this? This isn't just building a wine cellar and a recording studio, you're constructing a military-grade underground bunker. Lu Yui's design specifications were staggeringly extreme. He demanded the entire basement walls be cast with 1-meter-thick special reinforced concrete, sandwiched between 3 layers of explosion-proof steel plates. The basement entrance was to be refitted with double-alloy security doors matching the safety standards of a bank vault. Every window across the house would be replaced with top-tier bulletproof glass capable of withstanding rifle fire. The courtyard boundary walls were to be raised to 5 meters in height, with high-voltage power grids mounted along the top edge. Manager Liu, I suffer from mild paranoia. I never feel truly secure. Lu Yui offered him a cigarette, explaining without the faintest flicker of emotion. I also play rock music. As you can imagine, it gets extremely loud, so sound insulation is non-negotiable. As for the wine cellar, I collect rare vintage wines, so robust security is a must. Money is no object. My only demands are premium-grade materials and the fastest possible construction timeline. Manager Liu stared at Lu Yui's unwavering expression, clearly not joking, then thought about the 3 million yuan construction fee. He swallowed all his lingering doubts without a word. Wealthy clients called the shots. No matter how bizarre their requests, they had to be fulfilled. Consider it done, Mr. Liu, rest assured. Manager Liu thumped his chest to guarantee results. Our firm will source the highest quality materials and assign our most reliable crew. Within 2 months, we'll deliver an impenetrable, luxury underground compound. For the next month, the quiet villa site buzzed with non-stop activity. Construction vehicles shuttled in and out, cement mixers roared day and night, and mountains of steel, cement, and advanced building materials were hauled onto the premises. Lu Yui stayed on site supervising nearly every single day, ensuring every detail was executed exactly to his rigid standards. The construction crew was secretly awed by his exacting expertise. None dared dismiss him as merely a rich layman anymore. 1 week before the apocalypse descended, all renovation work was fully finished. When Manager Liu accompanied Lu Yui for the final inspection, even he was stunned by what stood before him. The colossal alloy front door, heavy as a prehistoric beast, the unbreakable bulletproof glass offering an unobstructed view of the outdoors, the vast underground chamber hidden beneath the earth, built like an end-times bunker. This place could no longer be called a home, it was a fully fortified stronghold. Mr. Liu, this place is truly, impenetrably safe, Manager Liu exclaimed with genuine awe. Lu Yui nodded in satisfaction, settled the full outstanding balance on the spot, and handed every member of the construction crew a generous red envelope bonus. Once all workers had left, complete silence settled over the property at last. Alone inside his steel fortress, Lu Yui took a deep breath and began his final, most critical task, stocking his granary. Like a tireless ant, he labored day and night, sorting and transporting the massive stockpile of supplies stored within his million-cubic-meter spatial pocket to every room and the enormous basement of the villa. He divided the basement into distinct zones: a storage area piled high with grain and canned goods, a cold storage chamber strung with sides of beef and mutton, an energy sector housing generators and diesel reserves, and even a small hydroponic farm he had outfitted to grow fresh vegetables. He installed independent heating, air purification, and recirculation systems, alongside a full water filtration and recycling setup. He was fully prepared for the eternal freezing winter bearing down on the world. December 22nd, 2325, the winter solstice. The sky was unervingly clear that day, the sunlight almost unnaturally bright. On the television news, a renowned meteorologist smiled as he gave an interview. Regarding the online rumors circulating lately claiming the solar flu will trigger a global temperature collapse, I can state responsibly that these claims are entirely baseless, lacking any scientific evidence. Citizens are urged not to spread misinformation and to peacefully enjoy this mild winter. Lu Yui sat on the living room sofa and switched off the TV. He picked up his phone and dialed his parents back in his hometown. This was the first time he had reached out to them voluntarily since his rebirth. "Hey, Yui. What made you call home all of a sudden?" His mother's familiar, warm voice crackled over the line. "Mom, stock up on plenty of rice, flour, and meat at home, and try not to go outside unless absolutely necessary." Lu Yui kept his tone as calm as he could manage. "Why would we buy extra supplies? We already have enough at home. What's gotten into you talking such odd nonsense? Just listen to me, buy as much as you can. And lock all the doors and windows tight." All right, we hear you. You take good care of yourself out there too." After hanging up, Lu Yui fell silent for a long while. He knew he had done everything he could. At 6 o'clock that evening, daylight faded at an eerily rapid pace. The once vivid blue sky turned an ominous ash gray. Temperatures plummeted off a cliff, dropping 5 degrees Celsius every single hour at a terrifying rate. Television stations still broadcast cheerful variety shows, yet the world outside the windows had already struck the opening chord of the apocalypse. Car engines stalled one after another in the bitter cold, blending shrill honking with panicked shouts and curses. Pedestrians wrapped their thin clothing tighter, screaming and scrambling in terror as the frigid wind descended without warning. City streetlights flickered out row by row. Civilized order was unraveling before people's very eyes. Meanwhile, inside Lu Yui's end times bunker, the air was warm as spring. He walked calmly down to the basement and ignited the 200-kilowatt diesel generator. A low rumble echoed through the space, and every light in the villa flickered to life, sealing all darkness and freezing cold outside. He stepped into his kitchen, outfitted to rival the back-of-house of a 5-star hotel, and pulled a premium marbled steak from the overflowing deep freezer. He poured himself a glass of aged vintage red wine. Soon, the sizzle of searing steak and its rich aroma filled every corner of the fortress. Carrying his dinner plate, Lu Yui walked to the floor-to-ceiling bulletproof window dominating the second-floor living room. He sat down, slicing into the tender, juicy steak with knife and fork, quietly watching the apocalyptic chaos swallowing the world beyond the glass. Chaos, wailing, endless ice, death. Everything unfolding outside felt like a silent film with no connection to him whatsoever. Just then, a single pure white snowflake, reeking of death, drifted slowly down from the ash-gray sky and stuck gently to the freezing pane of glass. 72 hours after the apocalypse. These 3 days marked a chaotic interlude. The old world had fully collapsed, and no new order had yet risen to replace it. Outside, temperatures stabilized at a deadly -80 degrees Celsius. At this extreme temperature, steel turned brittle as crackers, and human flesh was far more fragile still. Yet Lu Yui's life remained eerily tranquil, rigidly routine and cold. Every day, he spent hours observing the surrounding villa district from a god's-eye perspective, using high-powered military binoculars and 4 silent drones stockpiled before the disaster. The once peaceful neighborhood had devolved completely into a white hell. On the first day, he watched a man beat his neighbor to death with a golf club over the last scraps of firewood left in the other's fireplace. On the second day, he witnessed a man desperately trying and failing to start his luxury sports car, now frozen solid into a block of ice. Eventually, both the man and his vehicle became permanent ice sculptures. On the third day, countless more people perished silently, some in their sleep, others mid-search for food, their lives stolen by the bitter cold before they could utter a single scream. Watching humanity unravel from this detached vantage hardened Lu Yui's heart far colder than the ice covering the landscape. He was not watching individual lives snuffed out. He was rereading a blood-soaked textbook titled The Apocalypse. In his past life, he had been the story's most foolish, tragically doomed cautionary tale. A frantic, despairing banging suddenly cut through the quiet. No, it was not knocking on the front door. The villa's alloy gate was as heavy as a mountain. No sound like this could come from it. The noise originated directly against the massive bulletproof living room window. Lu Yui's brows drew together. He adjusted the surveillance camera trained on the courtyard entrance. On the monitor, a middle-aged man in a thin suit slammed his full weight against the unbreakable glass. Behind him, a deathly pale woman clutched a small child wrapped in tattered blankets to her chest. They were the Wang family, his next-door neighbors, a trio of three. Lu Yui recalled a petty dispute they had shared before the flu outbreak over the lawn border between their properties. When the man spotted the camera swiveling toward him, he latched onto it as his last shred of hope and threw himself wildly against the video intercom panel by the gate. "Please, open the door. I know someone's inside. I saw your lights, you're heating." The man's voice shook violently from freezing cold and unbridled terror, thick with sobs. "Have mercy on us. Just let us shelter here for one night, only one night. I'll give you all my cash, my luxury watch, my car keys, everything I own." The child he held, no older than 5 or 6, had lips turned deep indigo, barely drawing breath. Behind him, the woman dropped to her knees in the snow, kowtowing repeatedly toward the villa. Her forehead split open from the blows, blood welled to the surface, only to freeze instantly into dark crimson frost, a haunting, miserable sight. Lu Yui sat in his spring-warm living room, soft wool blankets draped over the sofa, watching this human tragedy unfold on screen without the slightest flicker of emotion in his eyes. He pressed the intercom talk button. Wild elation burst across the man's face, convinced his pleas had moved the resident within. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You're a good person. God will bless you." "My residence," Lu Yui's voice filtered through a voice modulator, cold, deep, and utterly emotionless, like a mechanical hum rising from an abyss, runs on geothermal circulating heating with a fixed computerized load capacity. It cannot support additional occupants. Please leave. The man's euphoria froze solid on his face. He stared blankly for more than 10 seconds before screaming in disbelieving rage. "What are you talking about? Some ridiculous load capacity lie. You just refused to save us. You're a murderer." The kneeling woman snapped out of her stupor and threw herself against the camera, her once well-maintained face contorted with venomous resentment, resembling a vengeful ghost. "You monster. You'll suffer a terrible fate. The cold will kill our child out here. You'll burn in hell. I curse you. I curse your entire family." Lu Yui cut the intercom feed without a single change of expression. He muted the surveillance audio, unwilling to listen to their meaningless curses and wailing any longer. Walking to the pantry, he retrieved a can of Italian beef stew, pried it open with a can opener, and ate slowly and unhurriedly. He remembered the soft-hearted fool he had been in his past life, the man who time and again yielded to scenes just like this, opening his doors to shelter so-called weak survivors, only to invite wolves into his home. He remembered the first family he took in stealing half his food stores the very next day. He remembered an injured man he rescued attempting to assault another female survivor once his wounds healed. He remembered the final act of compassion he showed, which earned him nothing but cold, fatal betrayal at the hands of Hao and Xiao Jia. Compassion? In this god-forsaken apocalypse, it was the cheapest, deadliest weakness of all. On the surveillance feed, the 3 family members finally collapsed locked in a desperate embrace outside the perimeter wall amid their curses. Gradually, heavy snow buried their bodies, forming a faint white mound. Lu Yui finished the last bite of canned beef and tossed the empty can neatly into the waste bin. He gazed at the 3 soon-to-be permanent ice sculptures outside, feeling absolutely nothing inside. At this moment, the gentle, vulnerable Lu Yui who softened at strangers' pleas had been buried forever alongside that ridiculous old world. In this white purgatory, the only person one could trust to survive was oneself. Second week of the apocalypse. After the Wang family froze into eternal ice statues beyond his walls, Lu Yui's life settled into absolute, total isolation and unbroken calm. He repeated the same quiet truth to himself. In this white purgatory, the only person one could trust to survive was oneself. While survivors outside fought tooth and nail over moldy loaves of bread and expired sausages, Lu Yui's days ran as precisely as a finely calibrated machine. 7 a.m. sharp. He rose and completed an hour of high-intensity training in the basement gym, ensuring his physical condition did not atrophy from comfortable seclusion. Mornings were dedicated to thorough inspections of every corner of the bunker, verifying heating system functionality, checking for malfunctions in the water circulation loop, monitoring diesel fuel reserves for the generators, and confirming the health of young vegetable sprouts in his small hydroponic farm. Afternoons were reserved for study and leisure. He combed through pre-apocalypse technical manuals on machinery repair, circuit modification, and weapon crafting, or projected old movies downloaded long before the disaster onto a massive screen with a mug of hot coffee in hand, as if an entire world separated him from the frozen hell outside. This isolated peace brought him no loneliness, instead, profound contentment. He knew this sanctuary had been forged by his own hands, paid for with the bloodshed of his past life and the meticulous foresight of his second chance. That afternoon, however, the smooth rhythm of his self-sufficient routine was shattered by a shrill alarm. Beep, beep, beep. The villa's peripheral infrared alert system wailed at high pitch. Lu Yui shot upright from the sofa, no trace of panic in his eyes, only frigid vigilance. He strode quickly to the monitoring room, where more than a dozen high-definition screens displayed clear footage of the courtyard exterior. A group of roughly 7 or 8 people stood clustered outside the alloy gate. Their clothes were tattered rags. They clutched crowbars, steel pipes, and fire axes. Gaunt and emaciated, their eyes held hollow numbness and feral hunger, like a pack of starved wolves wandering the ice plains for days on end. This was a makeshift scavenger gang. Lu Yui's gaze swept slowly across the crowd, then his pupils contracted violently. At the rear of the group, he spotted 2 faces etched permanently into his memory, burning with unquenchable hatred. Hao and Xiao Jia. They appeared far more wretched than the rest of the gang. A scab-covered laceration sliced across Hao's cheek, twisting his once handsome features into something menacing. Xiao Jia, the girl who had once obsessed over cleanliness and daily makeup, now stared blankly, covered in grime, matted straw like hair plastered to her face. Her expensive down jacket was torn open in multiple gashes, exposing gray cotton stuffing beneath. It was plain to see they occupied the lowest rung of this survival of the fittest gang, ordered about and exploited without mercy. Damn this gate, it's rock solid. A burly man with a full beard barked orders, directing Hao and several others to slam a thick steel pipe uselessly against the bank vault-grade alloy front door. Clang, clang, clang. The jarring racket sounded absurdly hollow across the silent snowfield, yet the gate did not shift an inch, not a single scratch marring its surface. Boss, it's no use, this door's cursed. Hao gasped for breath, currying favor with the bearded gang leader. Maybe we should move on to another house? Shut your mouth, useless trash. The bearded man kicked Hao hard in the leg, sending him sprawling into the snow. I said we break in here, so we break in here. At that moment, Xiao Jia seemed to recognize the villa's architectural layout. She stared dumbfounded at the familiar silhouette, and a wild, desperate light suddenly flared in her eyes. She sprinted recklessly toward the video intercom panel, slamming her palms against the camera as hard as she could, screaming through broken sobs. Yuri! Lu Yuri, I know it's you in there. I know you're hiding inside. Her voice shrill and mournful, overflowing with remorse and terror. I was wrong, Yui. I truly was. Hao forced me into everything. He swindled your parents' money. He's the one who dragged me off with those scavengers. Let me inside, please. I'll do anything for you. I'll work like your cattle and horse. I beg you. Tears streamed down her filthy face as she disavowed all blame for her betrayal entirely. Hao snapped out of his daze, scrambling forward on hands and knees to crowd beside the intercom, adopting a nauseatingly sycophantic grin. Brother Yui, my oldest best friend. I knew you'd find a way to survive. For the sake of our old bond, save us. We're starving to death. If you let us in, my life belongs to you from this day forward. The bearded gang leader they called boss and the rest of the scavengers paused their assault, watching this dramatic spectacle with idle curiosity. Lu Yui sat motionless before the surveillance monitors, silently observing their desperate performance, a cold sneer tugging at the corner of his mouth. He did not reply. He rose slowly and walked into the storage room, stocked like a miniature supermarket. He rummaged through the towering piles of supplies and retrieved a carton of instant noodles and several sausages, the cheapest, nutritionally worthless junk food in his entire stockpile, items he would not have spared a glance for in his past life. Carrying the carton of cheap food, he climbed the stairs to the second floor. He walked over to a window facing the main gate and slowly slid it open, a narrow gap barely wide enough for a palm. Frigid, biting wind rushed inside at once, yet to him, it felt like the tender caress of a lover. Down below, upon seeing the window creak open, Hao and Xiaojia's faces lit up with wild elation, convinced Lu Yui had finally softened his heart. But Lu Yui's next move plunged them straight into an icy despair. He did not pass the food down to them, nor even toss it at their feet. Swinging his arm hard as if discarding a sack of trash, he hurled the carton of provisions far out into the open. The box traced an arc through the air and crashed with a loud bang onto the snow 50 meters away from the villa gate, splitting wide open. Instant noodles and sausages spilled everywhere across the frozen ground. In the blink of an eye, the survivors outside the gate turned into rabid dogs, catching the scent of blood. Ignoring the bearded gang leader's orders entirely, they roared and threw every ounce of their strength into a mad dash for the scattered food. They traded punches and kicks over a single packet of noodles. They wrestled each other to the ground, fighting for half a sausage. The ugliest side of human nature laid fully bare in that moment. Hao and Xiaojia tried to scramble for a share too, but they were far too starved to muster any strength. A burly man kicked them flat into the snow without hesitation. Helpless, they watched every scrap get snatched up by others. In the end, they dropped to all fours like feral hounds, scrambling frantically amid the snow to scoop up trampled noodle crumbs mixed with ice and shoving them desperately into their mouths. Lu Yui watched the grotesque spectacle with a blank, emotionless expression. Killing them outright was never his goal. That would be far too merciful. He intended to repay every ounce of humiliation, starvation, and despair they had inflicted on him in his past life 100-fold, 1,000-fold over. He would make them writhe in endless regret and agony, forced to gaze up at him until their very last breath. The game had only just begun. He closed the window calmly. After that farcical display of so-called charity, the scavenger gang containing Hao and Xiaojia never returned. Perhaps they had fled the area to search for survival elsewhere further afield. Or maybe they had long since turned into another unremarkable ice sculpture scattered across this white wasteland. Lu Yui cared not in the slightest. In his eyes, those two were as good as corpses already. All he needed to do was pick the perfect moment to put an end to their miserable lives for good. 2 more weeks slipped by. Exactly 1 month had passed since the apocalypse descended. The 200-kilowatt diesel generator down in the basement functioned as the bunker's tireless heart, churning out constant light and warmth for Lu Yui. At the same time, however, it was a ravenous beast, devouring nearly a ton of diesel fuel every single day. That morning, after finishing his inspection of the central control panel, Lu Yui's brows knitted faintly together. Diesel reserves remaining, 91%. Though his spatial storage held enough fuel to sustain him for an extremely long time, the bone-deep sense of crisis forged in his previous life forbade him from letting any critical stock drop below the 90% safety threshold. It's time to head out. A full month of total isolation also meant he needed to survey the surrounding terrain in person and gather first-hand intelligence. After all, shutting oneself away from the outside world was a surefire way to meet a brutal end in the apocalypse. He headed for the garage. As the garage lights flickered on, a ferocious steel beast crouched silently within. Before the collapse, he had paid a hefty sum to purchase this military-grade cold-resistant off-road vehicle from a retired soldier. It boasted formidable base performance to begin with. Over the past 2 months, Lu Yui had personally subjected it to brutal overhauls. 3-centimeter-thick anti-collision steel plating lined its frame, and every window was replaced with bulletproof glass matching the standard fitted on his villa. A menacing V-shaped ice-breaking plow jutted from the front bumper, while the wheels were swapped out for special tires studded with alloy spikes, capable of crushing solid ice and flattening any obstacle that dared block its path. This was no longer merely a car, it was an unstoppable steel predator built to charge unimpeded across the ice plains. Lu Yui donned his most technologically advanced piece of gear, a graphene thermostatic combat suit. Lightweight yet tough, its built-in miniature temperature regulation system maintained his skin at a steady, comfortable 26 degrees Celsius at all times. He slung his well-worn compound bow over his shoulder, slid 20 custom alloy piercing arrows into the quiver on his back, and strapped a sharp fire axe to his waist. Fully armed head to toe, he climbed into the driver's seat and pressed the switch to lift the garage gate. Rumble. The heavy alloy barrier rose slowly, and a frigid white current reeking of death surged inward. Lu Yui steered his steel beast out into the silent world completely conquered by ice and snow. Half a meter of frozen snow blanketed every road, littered with abandoned vehicles and human ice sculptures frozen into countless contorted poses. The once bustling metropolis now resembled a colossal tomb abandoned by the gods, oppressively quiet enough to set one's nerves on edge. Yet Lu Yui's heart grew colder and calmer than the ice stretching endlessly around him. His destination was clear: the fuel depots belonging to several major logistics firms in the city's industrial zone. In his past life, these unguarded stockpiles had sustained countless small survivor factions in the early days of the freeze. The armored vehicle glided effortlessly across the ice, as if traveling on level ground, and he reached his target an hour later. The fuel depot security systems had long failed under -80-degree temperatures. Lu Yui used a pair of hydraulic cutters to slice through the lock with ease and drove his vehicle inside the compound. Standing before the massive white storage tanks towering like small hills, a flicker of excitement lit up his eyes. He stretched out a hand and rested his palm lightly against the cold metal surface of one tank, focusing his mind. The next instant, an impossible sight unfolded. An invisible, immense suction force emanated from his palm. Diesel fuel inside the tank, as though swallowed by an unseen leviathan, surged forth in a steady torrent and was drawn endlessly into his personal spatial storage. On the large digital readout board monitoring reserves inside the depot, the figures tracking fuel volume plummeted at a terrifying rate. 1,000 tons, 800 tons, 500 tons, 100 tons, 0. In mere minutes, the 1,000-ton tank was drained completely dry. The overwhelming sense of control that came with stripping the world bare and claiming all resources for himself utterly captivated Lu Yui. He repeated the process, emptying all 7 giant storage tanks across the entire depot complex. His spatial storage gained nearly 7,000 tons of diesel in total. Now he could run the generators non-stop for years on end without fear of running dry. On his journey back with his full haul, Lu Yui did not let his guard down. He parked the vehicle beneath a concealed overpass and launched a modified silent drone from the roof. He needed to confirm whether any large-scale, organized survivor groups remained active within the city. The drone ascended soundlessly into the sky, capturing a full aerial view of the ice-locked city. It was not long before Lu Yui spotted something noteworthy. Signs of survivor activity lingered around Huimin Shopping Center, the largest chain supermarket downtown. He zoomed in the drone's lens, and the high-definition feed transmitted a clear picture back to him. The supermarket had been transformed into a fledgling survivor camp. Roughly 40 to 50 people occupied the premises, having erected crude yet effective perimeter fortifications out of wrecked cars, shipping containers, and stacked ice blocks. A watchtower with a crackling bonfire even stood atop the supermarket roof, staffed by sentries. The entire camp operated with tight discipline, clearly ruled by an authoritative leader whose word was absolute. A heavy look crossed Lu Yui's face. He knew organized factions such as this were far deadlier than any wild beast roaming the apocalyptic wastes. He was just about to recall the drone and head home when the camera feed captured an internal conflict erupting inside the supermarket camp. A lone figure was dragged roughly outside by several burly men armed with wooden clubs and brutally beaten. Afterwards, the outcast was handed only a thin tattered coat and a tiny chunk of blackened bread before being driven out of the camp, left to fend for herself in the frozen wilderness. It was a punishment crueler than outright execution. Lu Yui watched the solitary, tottering figure trudge through knee-deep snow, and a thought crossed his mind. Instead of heading straight back to his bunker, he restarted his armored vehicle and tailed her silently from a safe distance far behind. Lu Yui maneuvered his steel predator like a ghost lurking amid the snowfield shadows, trailing the exiled woman at a moderate, unnoticeable distance. She appeared to be around 30 years old. Starvation and bitter cold had pushed her body to its absolute breaking point. She stumbled with every step, on the verge of collapsing at any second. Yet her survival instinct remained razor-sharp. She instinctively steered clear of potentially dangerous areas and deliberately stuck to the leeward side of buildings as she traveled. No trace of despair clouded her eyes, only an almost obsessive, unshakable composure. A sharp mind, Lu Yui silently judged to himself. Curiosity stirred within him toward this woman. As she struggled to cross an abandoned residential block, disaster struck without warning. Three ash-gray shapes materialized soundlessly from behind collapsed courtyard walls and circled to trap her. Wolves. No, far bulkier and deadlier than ordinary wolves. Their fur blended seamlessly with the surrounding snow in a pale gray-white camouflage. Their eyes glowed with an inhuman, cruel pale blue light, and their razor-sharp claws struck sparks against the frozen concrete beneath their paws. These were genetically mutated ice wolves, spawned by the extreme cold. They ranked among the most efficient, cold-blooded predators roaming this white wasteland. The woman instantly paled upon recognizing the terrifying creatures, yet she did not scream or attempt to flee. Snatching a broken steel pipe tipped with jagged shards off the ground, she gripped it firmly in both hands and assumed a defensive stance. She knew turning to run from these beasts would only hasten her death. A long, eerie howl split the silence. One ice wolf struck first. Coiling its hind legs, it lunged forward like a streak of white lightning, jaws wide open to sink its fangs into her throat. The woman poured every last ounce of strength into driving the steel pipe forward with all her might. Squelch! The pipe pierced the ice wolf's abdomen, yet the brute force of the impact sent her crashing onto the snow. The two remaining wolves immediately flanked her from both sides. She was trapped with nowhere to escape. A flicker of despair flashed across the woman's eyes, certain her end had come, until two nearly imperceptible whistling sounds cut through the air from 100 meters away, like the sigh of the Reaper himself. The two wolves' mid-pounce froze rigid. Embedded deep in the center of each skull was a single black alloy arrow, driven all the way through their brains. They crumpled to the ground without uttering a single whine. The injured wolf that the woman had stabbed let out a terrified yelp and tried to turn and flee with its wounded body dragging behind it. Whiz! A third arrow found its mark, shooting cleanly through its eye socket and penetrating its entire brain. The fight was over in 3 seconds flat. The woman stared dumbfounded at the incredible scene unfolding before her eyes. She slowly turned her head, gazing toward the direction the arrows had come from. A black off-road vehicle, a ferocious steel beast, had pulled up on a nearby street corner without her noticing. The car doors swung open. A tall, straight man clad in a black thermostatic combat suit walked slowly toward her, gripping a powerfully shaped compound bow in one hand. It was Lu Yui. The woman scrambled to her feet, tightening her hold on the steel pipe in her grasp. Her eyes blazed with unyielding vigilance, not a flicker of gratitude crossing her face despite being saved. She knew full well that in this apocalyptic wasteland, no one offered rescue without an ulterior motive. Sometimes human beings were far more terrifying than monsters. "Why did you save me?" She spoke first, her voice hoarse from exhaustion, yet unnervingly calm. "What do you want in return?" Lu Yui stopped in front of her and pushed his wind goggles up onto his head, revealing a pair of eyes as still as an ancient well. "I ask nothing of you," he replied evenly. "Your body and your freedom remain entirely your own. I only want to know why you were driven out of that camp." The woman's pupils constricted slightly, clearly not expecting this question. She fell silent for a moment, seemingly weighing Lu Yui's intentions. "You're not one of them," she countered. "I belong to no one," Lu Yui said flatly. "I am merely a passerby curious about their group. Of course, you may choose not to speak, and if so, our conversation ends here." With that, he turned to head back to his vehicle without the slightest hesitation. "Wait!" The woman called out to stop him at last. She understood this was her only chance to survive. "My name is Chen Jing," she drew a deep breath and said slowly. "I held a doctorate in biology before the apocalypse. I was exiled because I opposed the tyrannical rule of their leader, Scar." "Oh." Interest flickered across Lu Yui's face. "Tell me more." "Scar is nothing but a reckless brute with no strategy. He only knows how to control survivors through violence and fear, and he has no clue how to sustain long-term survival." Disdain flashed in Xinjing's eyes. "He hoards scarce medicine and food for his personal enforcers, while leaving skilled technicians and repairmen to starve. I proposed we ration supplies scientifically and build small indoor ecological farms to grow produce. He took it as a challenge to his authority and labeled me a destabilizing element before casting me out. A biology doctorate." Lu Yui's eyes lit up. He had never imagined that his casual pursuit would lead him to such an invaluable talent, someone far rarer and more precious than gold or weapons in the end times. Yet he betrayed no hint of his excitement. "One final question. He fixed his gaze on Qinjing. Do you know two people named Hao and Xiao Jie? Qinjing paused for a second, then nodded. I do. They arrived at the camp roughly 2 weeks ago. Both are master opportunists. Hao especially curries favor with Scar nonstop. He's climbed the ranks to become a minor captain now, living fairly comfortably. Lu Yuri nodded, everything clicking into place in his mind. Looking at the sharp, level-headed woman standing before him, whose expertise held immense value, a plan took shape inside his head. He would not foolishly invite her back to his bunker. Trust was the most extravagant luxury in the apocalypse, and he would never give it away lightly. I want to strike a deal with you, Lu Yuri said. A deal? Yes. Lu Yuri gestured toward a partially intact two-story building a short distance away. I will clear all threats inside that house for you, supply you with a weapon, and provide enough food and fresh water to sustain you alone for a full week. Qinjing's breath hitched softly. In exchange, Lu Yuri went on, you will act as my eyes. Return to the vicinity of the survivor camp at Huimin's supermarket. Using your wits and keeping yourself safe, monitor every movement within the compound for me. Prioritize gathering intelligence on Scar, Hao, and Xiao Jie, and send me daily updates via the encrypted communicator I will give you. Qinjing's mind raced a mile a minute. She realized this was far more than a transaction, it was a test. A trial to prove she truly possessed the wisdom and courage to survive alone in this broken world, as she claimed. Very well. She nodded without the slightest hesitation. I accept your terms. A faint, barely perceptible smile tugged at the corner of Lu Yuyi's mouth. He returned to his armored vehicle, retrieved the supplies and communicator for Qinjing, and helped her clear out the small two-story house briefly. Once the task was done, he said nothing more, climbed back into his steel beast, and vanished into the swirling wind and snow. Alone inside the temporary shelter now hers, Qinjing clutched the supplies and weapon tightly in her hands. She knew she had lived to see another day. Meanwhile, Lu Yuri had already returned to his bunker. His way of surviving shifted that day from simple, passive self-preservation to active, calculated scheming. A single chess piece had quietly been placed on the board. With the piece named Qinjing set in motion, Lu Yuyi's bunker finally gained eyes and ears stretching out into the outside world. He retreated to his self-contained sanctuary, while Qinjing lurked like a ghost in the shadows surrounding the Huimin supermarket survivor camp. Every night without fail, Lu Yui received intelligence transmitted by Qinjing's encrypted communicator. Her power of observation was astonishingly sharp. She detailed the camp's defense layout, head count, and weapon stockpiles in full, even breaking down Scar's personality and the internal conflicts between his subordinate captains with crystal clarity. She had proven her worth beyond all doubt. On this particular day, Lu Yui opened the communicator as usual, but the report Qinjing sent made his eyes narrow sharply. A severe bacterial dysentery outbreak has swept the camp. At least a dozen people are incapacitated with violent vomiting and diarrhea. The camp's entire reserve of antibiotics is exhausted. Scar is at his wit's end. This afternoon, he personally executed 2 guards who attempted to steal his private medical supplies. They're out of medicine. Lu Yui tapped his fingertips lightly against the table, his mind churning rapidly. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A chance to test the camp's strength and breaking point, to establish an aura of intimidation and, above all, a chance to collect the debt owed to him. He glanced at mountains of medical supply crates stacked in his storage room, a cold smirk curving his lips. The following morning, a sentry stationed on the rooftop watchtower of the Huimin camp yawned listlessly. A faint humming sound suddenly drifted down from the sky. He lifted his head warily, then his pupils blew wide with shock. A matte-black drone with a futuristic frame hovered silently directly over the camp, like a mechanical hawk from another realm, coldly surveying everything below. Enemy attack, he stammered into his walkie-talkie. Chaos erupted across the camp instantly. Scar, a burly man bearing a hideous knife scar across his face, burst outside with more than a dozen armed loyalists, craning their necks to stare nervously upward. What the hell is that thing? Confusion and dread clouded Scar's features. The drone made no hostile moves. It circled overhead once, then slowly lowered a small parcel wrapped in waterproof canvas, which landed precisely on the empty ground right in front of Scar. Having delivered the package, the drone turned soundlessly and vanished into the ash-gray sky, as if it had never existed at all. Scar and his men exchanged bewildered glances. After a long pause, they crept forward cautiously and unwrapped the parcel. Inside lay a brand new military-grade, encrypted walkie-talkie and a slip of paper sealed in a waterproof pouch. Printed on the paper in cold, emotionless typed text were these words. I possess the medicine you desperately need. Trade me every solar panel and controller stored in your warehouse. Turn on the walkie-talkie if you agree. Scar's face turned livid in an instant. This unknown party knew not only that they were out of medicine, but even that they hoarded solar panels in storage. This unseen presence loomed over them like an invisible specter, privy to every secret they held. Damn it. Scar crumpled the note into a tight ball. Playing mysterious games. Yet every man under him wore expressions of desperate hope. The dysentery continued to spread, and without medication, they would all perish. Faced with the specter of death, Scar swallowed his rage, picked up the walkie-talkie, and pressed the talk button. Hello. Static crackled over the speaker, then a distorted, cold, distant voice echoed forth, gender indistinguishable, stripped of all emotion. It seems you have made a wise decision. Scar roared furiously into the device. Who the hell are you? A coward hiding in the shadows. Show yourself and negotiate face to face if you dare. You have no need to know my identity, the voice remained unruffled. You only need to understand that I hold the power to decide whether your subordinates live or die. I set the terms of this trade. Your only options are acceptance or refusal. The feeling of being completely disregarded and controlled made Scar's veins bulge with rage, yet he dared not lash out. Fine. I'll trade. He ground his teeth together. How will the exchange work? Deliver the goods to the abandoned gas station 3 kilometers south. The medicine will be handed over once the cargo arrives. The line cut off. A vicious glint flashed in Scar's eyes. He leaned in and whispered to his loyal men, take our best weapons and lie in ambush all around the gas station ahead of time. I want to find out who this bastard is, daring to play tricks on my turf. Half an hour later, a 5-man squad tramped laboriously through the snow toward the gas station, hauling more than a dozen large solar panels. Hidden all around the gas station, unseen by the squad, 7 or 8 of Scar's elite henchmen had taken cover, their weapons trained firmly on the exchange zone. What they failed to realize was that every single one of their movements streamed live to Lu Yui's monitoring screen via the drone hovering high above. You won't learn your lesson until disaster strikes, Lu Yui sneered contemptuously. The moment Scar's ambushers finished taking up their positions, Lu Yui pressed a button on his remote control. A compact stun grenade the drone had pre-dropped at the center of the trap detonated instantly. Boom. No flames, no shrapnel. Only an unbearably blinding white flash and a deafening roar powerful enough to rupture eardrums exploded outward without warning. The 7 or 8 ambushers collapsed screaming in unison, clutching their eyes and ears as they writhed in agony, rendered completely incapacitated. The devilish voice crackled over the walkie-talkie once more. I have no interest in such a half-hearted welcome party. Upon hearing those words, Scar, waiting for news back at camp, went ice-cold from head to toe, a frigid chill shooting straight up his spine from his tailbone. This stranger knew absolutely everything they planned. Such unfathomable, otherworldly tactics crushed the last shred of reckless bravado and false hope lingering in his heart. Now, the cold voice continued, the terms of the trade have changed. In addition to all your solar panels, I want one person handed over. Send that trash to me. Make him deliver the goods to the designated location alone. A deathly silence fell on the other end of the communicator. Scar's knuckles whitened from crushing the walkie-talkie in his grip. He could not wrap his head around why the mysterious stranger would single out Hao, that spineless sycophant of a nobody. But there was no time for pondering now. The foe's uncanny surveillance, paired with the unknown weapon that had crippled his elite men in an instant, weighed on him like an insurmountable mountain, squeezing the air from his lungs. Fine. I'll agree to your terms. Scar ground the words out from between his gritted teeth. Back inside the camp, when Hao was told he was the extra bargaining chip for the trade, his legs buckled completely. He dropped to his knees, clinging desperately to Scar's thighs and begging hysterically. Boss, you can't do this to me. I've always been utterly loyal to you. That mysterious man definitely wants me dead. Please don't hand me over. Loyalty. Scar kicked him roughly away, revulsion and cold ruthlessness hardening his features. Your so-called loyalty amounted to watching my men waste away from sickness one by one. At long last, your useless hide has some small purpose. Either you go and complete this trade yourself, or I put a bullet in your head right now and send someone else to take your place. Choose. Faced with the black muzzle of a gun, all of Hao's pleas crumbled to nothing. In the end, beneath the scornful and gloating stares of every survivor, Hao stumbled forward alone like a walking corpse, pushing a handcart loaded with solar panels, trudging step by painful step toward what he saw as a living hell, the abandoned gas station. By the time he hauled the cargo to the designated spot, he was utterly drained, on the verge of collapse. Then that devilish voice crackled once more from the walkie-talkie clipped to his clothes. "The goods are acceptable." The second the words faded, Hao watched in abject terror as the mound of solar panels before his eyes vanished into thin air. He nearly lost his wits, dropping heavily onto the frozen ground, convinced he had encountered a ghost. "The medicine, where's the medicine?" he stammered in terror. 30 meters behind you. Fetch it yourself." Hao spun around and spotted a sealed medical supply crate resting silently in the snow. He scrambled over on hands and knees, and the mysterious stranger's final message blared from the walkie-talkie. "Go back and tell Xiao Jia, her turn will come soon enough." Static fizzled across the speaker, and the line went dead. Hao stood frozen to the spot, soaked through with cold sweat, as if plummeted into an endless abyss. He understood now. The brother he had betrayed in his past life had transformed into an incomprehensible, unstoppable horror. And this revenge was only just beginning. The deathly silence on the other end of the communicator was finally broken by Scar's snarling consent. Half an hour later, Hao stumbled back to the Huimin supermarket camp half dead, dragging the crate of life-saving medicine. His mind reeled, his body soaked in frigid sweat and stiff with frostbite. The second he crossed the threshold, he crumpled to the ground, his teeth chattering nonstop. The survivors swarmed him at once, grabbing for the medical crate as if witnessing a divine miracle. Meanwhile, Scar hauled the still shaking Hao roughly to his feet. "Speak. Tell me exactly what happened." By the light of the bonfire, Hao rambled incoherently to Scar and the gathered survivors, recounting the horrifying ordeal that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his days. I dropped off the cargo at the gas station, and then I heard that voice telling me to get the medicine." Fear thickened every syllable of his disjointed account. "When I turned around, the crates of solar panels were just gone. Vanished out of nowhere. Boss, I didn't see a soul, didn't hear a single other sound. And then..." Scar's gaze turned pitch dark and menacing. Then he said, a whimper of terror caught in Hao's throat. He darted a glance at Xiao Jia, who stood pale as a sheet amid the crowd, and trembled as he repeated the words. He said, "Tell that woman her turn is next." The sentence detonated like an icy bomb inside the camp. Panic spread through the crowd like a contagious virus. Before this, the mysterious phantom had only felt like a distant, unknown threat. But this direct, targeted death sentence sent a bone-chilling dread shooting from the soles of everyone's feet straight to the crowns of their heads. Whispers rippled through the survivors, their stares fixed on Hao and Xiao Jia, unmasked with undisguised contempt and profound fear. "It's them he's after all along. Damn it, I knew those two were trouble. They dragged this nightmare straight to our door the second they showed up. They're walking omens of disaster. Kick them out at once, or we'll be the next ones to die." The once relatively stable camp descended into paranoia overnight. No one dared speak to Hao or Xiao Jia anymore. Even during daily gruel rations, people deliberately shuffled far away from them, as if they carried some contagious curse. For Xiao Jia, the second she heard Lu Yui's message, the frayed thread holding her sanity together snapped completely. She shattered into hysterics. Nightmares plagued her endlessly. She kept seeing Lu Yui's cold, unyielding face, replaying the vision of the steel rebar piercing his chest in their past life. She jolted awake screaming every night, restless day and night, seeing every stranger as an enemy out to kill her. That evening, in their cold, shadowy corner of the camp, she and Hao erupted into their fiercest argument since the apocalypse began. "It's all your fault. All of this is your doing." Xiao Jia clutched fistfuls of her hair, shrieking hysterically at Hao. "If it weren't for you, I never would have betrayed him. Now he's come to claim our lives. He said I'm next, I'm going to die. What the hell are you yelling at me for?" Hao had been pushed to the brink of madness by days of unrelenting stress. He slapped her hard across the face, lowering his voice to a venomous snarl. "Where was all this conscience when we swindled his parents out of their money? Now you're scared? It's far too late for that. I don't care. You have to think of something. You have to save me. What could I possibly do?" Hao buried his face in his hands, overcome with despair. "He's not human, he's a ghost. We stand no chance against him. Naturally, their screaming fight reached Scar's ears. Now that the medicine had brought the camp's dysentery outbreak under control, Scar's dread of the mysterious phantom had peaked. He summoned the still trembling How alone to the supermarket manager's office, his private quarters. No one else remained inside, only Scar and his two most trusted enforcers. I'll ask you one final time. Scar's tone was eerily calm, yet lethal killing intent blazed plainly in his eyes. Tell me every single thing you saw and heard during the trade, down to the smallest detail. If you utter one single lie, I'll leave you frozen into an ice statue outside the camp this instant. Terrified out of his wits, How dropped to his knees and recounted every last scrap of what he had experienced. What did he look like? Man or woman? Could you make out anything from the voice? After listening, Scar's rage flared hotter than ever, and he drove a brutal kick into How's chest. I don't know. I truly don't. How curled up on the ground in agony, sobbing violently. That voice, it's neither male nor female, like a computer-generated recording. Boss, he's not human. He's a vengeful ghost come to drag us to hell. Scar's interrogation yielded nothing of substance, leaving him more uneasy and furious than before. An invisible enemy lurked within the perimeter of his camp, and he could not even identify who they were. Every bit of this unrest was quietly observed and meticulously documented by Qingjing. Late into the night, hidden in her isolated nook, she transmitted a full report via the encrypted communicator to Lu Yuyi, detailing the pervasive paranoia sweeping the camp and, above all, Xiao Jie's rapidly unraveling mental state. Inside the bunker, warmth lingered like spring. Lu Yuyi read Qingjing's intelligence report with a blank, unreadable expression. Everything unfolded exactly as he had planned. Fear was the most powerful weapon in this broken world. It could crumble the toughest warriors and tear the tightest alliances apart from within. The seeds of terror had been planted. All he needed to do now was wait patiently. Wait for them to take root, sprout, and ultimately destroy his enemies entirely. He set the communicator aside and walked toward the brand new solar panels he had just finished installing and calibrating. On the central control screen, the green digits tracking incoming electrical power ticked steadily upward. Outside the bulletproof glass stretched a hellcape where humanity writhed in despair. Within these walls lay a sanctuary forged by science and rationality alone. Inside the bunker stood a realm built upon logic and technology. After days of installation and calibration, Lu Yuyi had completed the first major upgrade to his bunker's energy system. Dozens of high-efficiency solar panels laid across the warehouse roof drew steady, reliable power even beneath the faint, weak sunlight of the apocalypse. On the central console screen, the red numbers marking diesel fuel consumption slowed their rate of ticking noticeably, while the green figures tracking stored electricity climbed gently higher. Energy system upgrade complete. Diesel fuel consumption reduced by 70%. Lu Yuyi nodded in satisfaction as he scanned the data display. This meant his bunker could sustain operation far longer on its reserves, and his sense of safety deepened tenfold. For once, he found a moment of leisure. He retrieved premium coffee beans stockpiled before the solar flew from storage and brewed himself a rich pour-over. A thick, aromatic haze filled the warm interior. Clutching his mug, Lu Yuyi stepped to the massive floor-to-ceiling bulletproof window in his second-floor study, silently staring out at the unchanging white wasteland beyond. Fear fermented and festered within his enemy's camp. He remained seated atop his self-made sanctuary, biding his time for the harvest. Everything appeared firmly under his control. Until suddenly, woo, woo, woo. A shriller, more urgent alarm than any previous one split the peaceful quiet of the bunker wide open. Warning lights lining the walls and central control panel flashed instantly from safety green to blood crimson, signifying the highest threat level. Warning, mass biological incursion detected. Warning, outer perimeter defense grid under sustained assault. A cold synthesized electronic voice echoed throughout every room of the fortress. Lu Yuyi's pupils contracted sharply, shifting instantly from relaxed repose to full combat readiness. He slammed his coffee mug down on a table and sprinted to the surveillance bank. The footage streaming across a dozen monitors stole his breath away. A massive pack of wolves had gathered outside his villa's outer wall without his notice. More than 30 in total. These were no ordinary wolves. They were the genetically mutated ice wolves he had encountered outside the supermarket camp, warped by the extreme sub-zero cold. Their fur bore an ash-gray-white hue that camouflaged them seamlessly against the snow. They stood nearly twice the size of pre-apocalyptic wild wolves, their pale blue eyes glinting with a brutal, cunning intelligence. Worse still, this pack did not behave like scattered, solitary beasts. They moved with the disciplined coordination of a well-trained army. At the edge of the high-voltage electric fence, several ice wolves threw themselves forward recklessly in rotating waves, sacrificing their own bodies to drain the grid's power. Their frames charred to cinders the second the high current struck them, yet more wolves charged forward without hesitation, using their fallen packmates' burnt corpses as insulation to hammer against the defensive barrier. Behind the horde stood an enormous alpha wolf, its coat nearly pure silver white, a full head taller than the rest of the pack. It stood calmly atop a large boulder, overseeing the siege like a conquering monarch. The alpha wolf. Lu Yui's heart sank. He immediately activated the concealed automatic nail gun turrets embedded within the compound walls. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Dozens of firing ports slid open at once, firing steel nails propelled by high-pressure gas in a relentless hail down upon the wolf pack. Yet the alpha had clearly anticipated this countermeasure. It let out a low, rumbling howl, and the pack instantly reorganized their formation. No longer clustered in easy target groups, they scattered fast, taking cover behind abandoned vehicles and collapsed rubble lining the outer wall, advancing in alternating covered rushes toward the villa. The suppressing fire from the automatic nail guns lost nearly all its effectiveness at once. Damn it. These beasts have evolved far too much intelligence. A thin sheen of cold sweat beaded on Lu Yui's forehead. A violent crackling buzz split the air. Crushed by the pack's unsparing suicide assaults, the outer high-voltage grid shorted out in a shower of electric sparks, rendered completely useless. The first line of defense had fallen. The wolves let out wild, triumphant howls and surged through the courtyard wall like a tidal wave, throwing themselves ferociously against the villa's main structure. Lu Yui realized he could not waste endless ammunition on automated weapons so long as the directing alpha remained untouched at the rear of the horde. He drew a deep breath, ruthless resolve hardening his gaze. He strode quickly to the second-floor study and pressed a hidden button set into the wall. The section of wall that looked identical to every other panel slid silently apart to either side, revealing a specialized firing port forged from reinforced special alloy, concealed within the structure. For the first time, he voluntarily opened a window from his bunker out into this end-times wasteland. Bitter frigid wind, thick with the rank stench of wolf fur and blood, flooded into the room. Lu Yui raised his powerful compound bow, fixing a cold, unwavering stare through the firing port onto the silver alpha wolf 100 meters distant. The alpha sensed the deadly threat emanating from within the bunker. It fell silent, lifting its head to lock its eerie pale blue eyes with Lu Yui's through the raging snowstorm, locked in a wordless standoff. This was a contest between hunter and prey and a duel between two apex rulers. Lu Yui held his breath, knowing he would likely only get one perfect shot. The alpha wolf was far too shrewd, constantly positioning its body cleverly behind the wreckage of an abandoned truck, exposing nothing but its eyes to survey the battlefield. Not willing to show yourself? Lu Yui let out a cold, mocking sneer. He stowed his compound bow, focused his mind, and pulled a massive raw steak, still dripping with blood, out of his personal spatial storage. This top-grade cut of meat had been stockpiled long before the apocalypse, yet now it served as his bait. He hurled the steak hard through the firing port. The bloody slab tumbled across the snow, releasing a rich scent of raw flesh that held a fatal allure for all carnivores. Sure enough, the silver-furred alpha wolf stirred the instant it caught the whiff of blood. A low rumbling growl vibrated in its throat, clear hunger burning in its eyes, for this unexpected feast dropped from nowhere. Now, in the split thousandth of a second when greed drove the alpha to poke its head out from behind cover to pinpoint the steak's location, Lu Yui struck. He drew, aimed, and released his bow in one fluid, lightning-fast motion. Whiz! The black alloy-piercing arrow streaked forth like a lightning bolt tearing through space, carrying the howl of the Reaper, arriving faster than the eye could follow. The alpha sensed mortal danger and snapped its head back to hide. But it was already too late. The arrow buried itself precisely in its left eye socket. The tremendous kinetic force drove the shaft straight through its entire brain, bursting out the back of its skull in a spray of steaming gray matter and blood. Those pale blue eyes filled with disbelief and bitter resentment, their light fading rapidly. The alpha's colossal body crashed heavily to the ground. At the moment their leader fell, every wolf assaulting the villa froze mid-action. They let out frightened, mournful howls, then turned tail and scattered like a receding tide, vanishing into the boundless wind and snow. The crisis was over. Lu Yuyi slowly lowered his compound bow, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Glancing at the dozens of ice wolf corpses scattered inside and outside the compound walls, especially the towering alpha, he doubted for the first time that his bunker was truly impervious. The outside world was growing deadlier in ways he could not yet fathom. He realized passive defense alone would no longer suffice. Danger also breeds opportunity. A sharp glint flickered in Lu Yuyi's eyes. He did not seal the firing port immediately. Instead, he monitored the surrounding area via surveillance feeds for half an hour to confirm no further threats lingered. Only then did he suit up in full tactical gear and activate the unlock sequence for the courtyard gate. The heavy alloy barrier slid open, and a bitter gale heavy with the stench of wolf blood washed over him. He walked over to the silver alpha's corpse and knelt to examine it closely. This mutated beast's hide was tough as cured leather, its fangs and claws sharp as blades, and a strange, unique energy seemed to pulse within its flesh. All of these are valuable resources. Without hesitation, he focused his mind and swept every ice wolf carcass inside and outside the walls, including the massive alpha, into his spatial storage. Once finished, he hurried back into the bunker, the gate sliding shut once more to seal him off from the frozen wasteland beyond. He knew studying these mutated creatures would be one of his most critical priorities moving forward. Taking the initiative to understand this utterly alien new world was the only path to survival. After storing all the ice wolf corpses in his spatial pocket, Lu Yuyi returned to his bunker. He did not rest right away. Instead, he moved the silver alpha's body down to a room in the basement he had converted into a makeshift laboratory. Beneath bright overhead lights, he donned full professional protective gear and began dissecting the mutated beast. The dissection findings weighed heavy on his heart. The alpha's muscle density and bone tensile strength far surpassed any known pre-apocalyptic creature. Most shocking of all, nestled deep at the core of its brain was a fingernail-sized crystal glowing with a faint cool blue light. This crystal appeared to be the source of the intelligence that let the alpha command its pack and outthink ordinary wild beasts. The world has truly changed. Lu Yuyi pulled off his gloves and muttered to himself. He knew the wolf siege had only been the start. As time passed, the creatures roaming outside would grow stronger and smarter by the day. Humans who stood stagnant would be ruthlessly weeded out. A sturdy bunker and a limited arsenal of weapons were no longer enough. He needed greater power capable of crushing any threat that crossed his path. As Lu Yuyi's sense of urgency about the future intensified, another struggle for survival unfolded at the Huimin supermarket survivor camp. Lu Yuyi's death sentence hung over Xiaojie's head like an invisible sword of Damocles night and day, pushing her to the brink of total mental collapse. She endured the survivor's scornful, cold stares. Some even seemed to eagerly await her death. She watched Hao grow increasingly deranged after the trade, lashing out and beating her without provocation. She knew her days were numbered. Scar, the camp's leader, would sacrifice her and Hao without a second thought at any moment to appease the mysterious phantom. The final straw broke that evening. Temperatures plummeted further, making supply runs exponentially harder, and the camp's food reserves were nearly exhausted. To stretch resources thin, Scar announced a cruel verdict to the whole group. Tomorrow morning, to let more of us live, Scar's gaze swept over every shivering survivor. I will personally execute several useless leeches who only eat and contribute nothing. His eyes landed last on Hao and Xiaojie huddled in the corner, undisguised killing intent chilling them to their bones. It's over. Those two words echoed endlessly in Xiaojie's mind. Yet as she stumbled back to their frigid corner, the terror of impending death ignited an unprecedented urge to survive within her. She refused to die. Why should she perish? She was still so young. Desperate to cling to life, she made a reckless decision. She stared at Hao, dead drunk, and passed out on the floor from despair, a flicker of ruthless resolve flashing across her face. Silently, she stole the military walkie-talkie he treated as a lucky charm from his arms. Then, under cover of night, she slipped out to the camp's perimeter like a scurrying rat. The bitter wind sliced her face like knives, yet she felt no pain. Standing alone in the empty snowfield, she screamed toward the direction of Lu Yuyi's villa at the top of her lungs, over and over. Lu Yuyi, I know you're watching. I know you can hear me. I've got something huge to tell you, something life-changing. She had no way of knowing if Lu Yui truly monitored this place, but this was her only shot at living. She was betting everything on this single gambit. Minute after minute ticked by. Nothing answered save the howling blizzard. Just as the last spark of hope in Xiao Jia's heart was about to freeze solid. Static. A faint crackle of static suddenly emanated from the walkie-talkie clutched in her hands. Then that demonic voice, the one that haunted her nightmares and filled her with crippling terror, spoke slowly. You had better. The tone was cold, flat, utterly devoid of emotion. Give me a reason to spare your life. My patience is wearing thin. Xiao Jia's whole body trembled, overwhelming joy and dread crashing over her at once. She sobbed brokenly into the device, her words tumbling over one another. Don't kill me. Please spare me. I know a massive secret, something that could make you 100 times stronger than you are now. Silence stretched out on the other end of the line. That quiet weighed heavier than any demand, suffocating Xiao Jia. It's Scar. Scar and his men. She dared not pause for a breath, rushing her words out. A few days ago, when they went scavenging for supplies, they found a map on a dead military officer. It's a map to a small military armory hidden deep in the mountains outside the city. There are guns inside, hundreds of guns and countless rounds of ammunition. They plan to head there once things calm down in a few days. I can sneak the map for you. I'll hand it straight over to you. Just spare my life. I beg you. She laid down her final bargaining chip all at once. Another long silence fell over the walkie-talkie. A storm of emotion roiled inside Lu Yui. An armory. The 3 words sent his blood racing. This was exactly what he needed most. With a firearm stored there, he would finally possess the strength to take the offensive and crush any foe that stood in his way. Yet he betrayed no hint of his inner excitement. After a long pause, his icy voice cut through the static once more. Deliver the map to the gas station where we traded last time. My patience will not last forever. Remember, you're begging me, not the other way around. The line went dead without another word. Xiao Jia collapsed into the snow, gasping for air. She knew she had bought herself temporary reprieve. But the path ahead would be a road of betrayal far deadlier than death itself. The bitter wind whipped around her, yet she felt no chill. Her heart had long since frozen solid. Xiao Jia crumpled into the snow, heaving ragged breaths. She had escaped death for now, but the treacherous path of betrayal stretching before her was more dangerous than dying outright. She dared not linger outdoors for long. Mustering the last of her nearly frozen strength, she slunk back like a stray dog to their frigid corner inside the Huimin supermarket camp. She stared at how, unconscious from heavy drinking, a tangled swirl of emotions crossing her face, hatred, a flicker of pity, but above all, the cold ruthlessness born of a desperate will to survive. She knew stealing the map from the bloodthirsty Scar single-handedly was nothing but a fool's fantasy. Her only hope lay with a mysterious, devil-like Lu Yui, who might offer her aid. Inside the bunker, Lu Yui set down the walkie-talkie, his eyes deep and unfathomable as the ocean. A military armory. This unexpected bargaining chip completely rearranged his original plans, yet it also presented an enormous opportunity to revolutionize his combat power. Still, he knew full well Xiao Jia could never be trusted. Today she would sell Scar to save her own skin. Tomorrow she would betray him for a greater reward. A disposable tool, perfectly crafted for one-time use before being discarded. Lu Yui judged her coldly. He picked up a separate encrypted communicator and opened Qinjing's channel. Dr. Qin, I have a new assignment for you. A calm voice from Qinjing soon crackled over the walkie-talkie. Go ahead. There's a woman named Xiao Jia in the camp, Lu Yui said without a trace of emotion. She will try to steal a map off Scar. I need you to secretly assist her and make sure she succeeds. One condition, under no circumstances are you to expose yourself. There was a brief pause on Qinjing's end, clearly as she weighed the risks of the mission. Understood, she replied crisply. Xiao Jia's a bundle of nerves right now, and Scar already suspects her. To pull this off, we'll need to create a massive distraction to draw Scar and all his loyal followers away. That's exactly what I had in mind. A faint smirk tugged at Lu Yui's lips. You're the expert on how to pull it off. Leave it to me. After ending the call, a sharp glint flickered in Qinjing's eyes. She knew this was another test from Lu Yui. The next day, a rumor began to spread quietly through the camp. Hey, have you heard? Boss Scar's hiding an entire crate of beef cans, one survivor whispered mysteriously to the man beside him as gruel was being doled out. Is that true? We're stuck drinking this watery slop every day, and he hoards all the good food for himself. The other man's face instantly twisted with greed and envy. Absolutely true. Someone saw him sneaking around his office eating them in the middle of the night. The smell drifted miles. Like a virus with wings, the rumor spread to every corner of the camp in a matter of hours. For these survivors, starving and teetering on the brink of death, a full crate of beef cans held far greater allure than gold or companionship. Resentment, jealousy, and anger began to simmer among the crowd. Hiding in the shadows, Qin Jing watched it all coldly. The bait had been laid. That evening, as Scar and his inner circle prepared to enjoy a far heartier dinner than the ordinary survivors, the conflict finally erupted. A gaunt, starved man stepped forward to block their path. "Boss Scar." He summoned his courage and shouted. "We're all starving to death, why do you get to feast on meat every single day?" His words lit the fuse on the crowd's pent-up fury. "Yeah, this isn't fair. Hand the food over. Split it with everyone. We want the beef cans." Dozens of survivors swarmed Scar and his men, their emotions running wild like enraged beasts. "Damn it all, you dare rebel against me?" Scar flew into a towering rage. He never imagined these meek, sheep-like trash would openly defy his authority. He drew the pistol holstered at his waist and pointed it straight at the tall man who'd spoken up first, a vicious grin stretching across his face. "Anyone who utters another word gets sent straight to hell right now." Yet faced with the agony of crippling starvation, even the threat of death lost its terror. The crowd shrank back but refused to scatter. A riot capable of tearing the entire camp apart was seconds from breaking out. Scar and all his loyal enforcers were trapped in the square, their full attention seized by the sudden upheaval. This was the perfect window Xiao Jia had been waiting for. Slipping through the chaos like a rat while every gaze was fixed on the square, she crept silently up to the supermarket's second floor and entered the manager's office that Scar used as his bedroom. Her heart hammered wildly, her hands shaking non-stop from nervousness. She ransacked every corner, under the bed, inside cabinets, every drawer. At last, tucked inside a locked metal cabinet, she found the slightly yellowed map wrapped in craft paper. The second she laid hands on it, Xiao Jia dared not linger a second longer, not even sparing a glance at the office she'd once ached to live in. She climbed out the rear window, fled the camp under cover of night, and ran as fast as she could toward the abandoned gas station 3 kilometers away, the prearranged meeting spot. Every move she made was captured by the cold, watchful eyes hovering high above. Lu Yui's drone oversaw the entire drama he'd orchestrated from start to finish. He watched Xiao Jia trudge through the snow, glancing over her shoulder every few steps, paralyzed by fear. An hour later, Xiao Jia finally reached the gas station. Following his instructions, she laid the map on the most visible counter inside the convenience store, then cowered behind a pile of discarded tires some distance away, trembling as she lifted the walkie-talkie to her mouth. I'm here," her voice begged desperately. "I left the map inside. Can I come to you now? Please take me in. It's freezing out here, I can't survive alone." Lu Yui's emotionless voice crackled through the speaker. "Our deal was for the map, not safe haven for you." Xiao Jia reeled as if struck by lightning, shouting in disbelief. What do you mean? You promised you wouldn't kill me." "I have not killed you," Lu Yui's tone remained icy. "I am simply telling you to leave. Get out of here. Vanish as far as you can before I change my mind." Static filled the line once he finished speaking. Xiao Jia stared blankly at the walkie-talkie, the last flicker of hope dying completely in her eyes. She finally understood. From the very beginning, she had been nothing more than a pawn, a disposable tool, cast aside once her use was exhausted. High overhead, the drone shaped like a mechanical hawk descended slowly. Its robotic arm clamped neatly around the craft paper map on the counter. Without pause, it ascended again, rotor gusts whipping snow across Xiao Jia's numb face. She watched the drone vanish into the endless night, the wind swallowing all sound. Her soul felt hollowed out entirely. She did not weep or scream curses, only let loose a strange, hooting cackle like an owl. The laugh echoed through the empty gas station, shrill and thick with utter despair. Eventually the laughter died away. Xiao Jia stood alone amid the station's frozen grounds, facing an infinite, frigid darkness. She had won the chance to live she'd begged for, only to be exiled to a hell far longer and crueler than death itself. This was the price of betrayal. Once Xiao Jie's shrill laughter was swallowed whole by the blizzard, Lu Yui piloted the drone back to his bunker with the vital map secured aboard. He felt not an ounce of pity or guilt. In this apocalyptic wasteland where human life weighed lighter than paper, sympathy was the first shovelful of dirt for your own grave. Returning to his warm study, Lu Yui carefully unfolded the slightly yellowed craft paper map across his desk. It was a hand-drawn military chart, marked with red lines tracing a secret mountain route outside the city. A five-pointed star marked the destination, with two small characters scrawled beside it: Armory. Straight line distance, 120 kilometers. Lu Yui cross-referenced the map with high-precision satellite imagery he downloaded before the flu, quickly plotting the relatively safest travel route. He knew those mere 120 kilometers were an impassable chasm in this broken world, teeming with unforeseen deadly threats. He had to prepare for every possible contingency. He spent the entire following day in his vast garage. He performed a full overhaul and major upgrades to his Steel Beast Apocalypse vehicle. He swapped in brand new antifreeze engine oil, reinforced the menacing ice-breaking plow mounted on the front bumper, and fitted 4 high-powered LED searchlights plus 2 external storage racks for supplies onto the roof. Afterward, he stocked the truck and his personal spatial storage with provisions for the long expedition. Enough compressed rations and purified water to last 7 days, full medical trauma kits, professional mechanical repair tools, his trusted compound bow, and a full 500 alloy-piercing arrows. Everything was ready. 1 hour before departure, he contacted Qin Jing at the Huimin supermarket camp via his encrypted communicator. Dr. Qin, Lu Yui's voice remained as steady as ever. I will be away for several days. What is the situation at the camp? Qin Jing's calm reply came swiftly over the line. All relatively stable. With Scar and his elite enforcers gone missing, the camp has no clear leader, and I can still keep the situation under control for now. However, Hao is still here. He seems to have sensed something, and he's been restless and stirring trouble these past few days. Nothing but worthless trash. Pay him no mind, Lu Yui said flatly. Prioritize your own safety while I'm gone. If you encounter an unmanageable threat, you are permitted to abandon the camp and evacuate on your own. Understood. A faint, barely detectable warmth softened Qin Jing's tone. Please, stay safe out there. I will. He ended the call without further delay. Climbing into the cold cockpit of his Apocalypse vehicle, he ignited the engine. A low rumble, like a beast stirring from hibernation, reverberated through the garage as the heavy alloy gate rolled upward. He steered his steel Predator forward, charging unhesitatingly into the boundless, snow-blanketed wilderness beyond. His long expedition had officially begun. Every kilometer of the 120-mile journey carried mortal danger in the apocalypse. Shortly after driving past the city limits, he hit his first major obstacle. An earthquake from before the flu, compounded by the rapid freezing of the Earth's crust, had split the ground open into a vast, bottomless ice fissure over 10 meters wide, a hideous scar cutting straight across his path. Lu Yui parked at the edge of the rift and launched his drone. After half an hour of aerial surveying, he spotted the only viable crossing several kilometers away, a makeshift bridge formed by several overturned heavy cargo trucks. Drawing a deep breath, he revved the vehicle's engine to maximum output. Roar! The steel beast let loose a thunderous growl, surging forward like an arrow loosed from a bow. It charged cleanly between the wrecked truck hulls and landed steady on the fissure's opposite bank. He had crossed without incident. Yet trouble followed close on his heels. As the vehicle reached a fully frozen lake, a horde of mutated creatures he had never seen before blocked his path. They were giant scorpions the size of young calves, their entire bodies encased in icy blue chitin that glinted metallic under weak sunlight. Their stingers curled high above their backs, their tips dripping a deadly pale blue venomous glow. Ice scorpions. Over 50 individuals, Lu Yui's expression turned grave. He had no intention of charging blindly through the swarm. He halted the truck at once and activated the remote weapon turret hidden on the roof via the vehicle's control panel. It was a modified special pneumatic gun he'd built, capable of firing steel nails at high velocity. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. A relentless hail of steel nails swept across the scorpion horde like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. However, the chitin shells of these ice scorpions were far harder than he could have imagined. Most steel nails ricocheted off them, leaving only faint white scratches and failing to inflict fatal damage. One ice scorpion even darted nimbly up to the vehicle, clamping its massive pincers hard against the crash-proof steel plating on the front bumper with an ear-splitting creak. Suicidal trash. Lu Yui let out a cold snort, slammed his foot hard on the gas, and activated the front ice-breaking plow at the same time. Crunch! That ice scorpion, its rigid shell and all, was instantly crushed into a shower of pale blue icy fragments. After burning through several crates of steel nail ammunition and personally running over more than a dozen scorpions, the swarm finally grew fearful and slowly retreated. Lu Yui had no desire to linger and immediately drove away from the dangerous frozen lake. Following 2 full days and nights of grueling travel, he crossed snow-capped mountain ranges and trekked through silent, lifeless forests. At dusk on the 3rd day, the 5-pointed star marked on the map came into view. It was an unremarkable small hill buried deep under snow. Lu Yui parked his vehicle at the foot of the hill. Guided by the map, he quickly located the concealed secret entrance carved into the mountainside, its power supply long dead. Yet the state of the entrance was far worse than he had anticipated. A massive landslide had buried the entire entryway under tons of rubble, mud, and permafrost that never thawed. The alloy gate was completely blocked behind a barrier dozens of meters thick. Staring at what looked like a tomb fused into the mountain itself, Lu Yui felt no trace of dejection. Instead, blazing resolve ignited in his eyes. He walked up to the rubble pile, carefully surveying its structure and calculating the optimal blast points. Then he retrieved professional demolition gear and small-shaped charges stockpiled before the apocalypse from his spatial storage, enough explosives to level an entire small building. He intended to blast open this path to greater power by the most brutal, direct means possible. Calmly, he placed several shaped charges at the structurally weakest points he had precisely calculated. After running the fuses and setting the detonator, he sprinted hundreds of meters away to take cover behind a sturdy boulder. He stared at the nondescript hill in the distance, the burning fire in his gaze growing brighter still. He knew what lay beyond that door represented the ultimate authority and absolute order within this frozen world. Without a second's hesitation, he pressed the detonator in his hand. Boom! A muffled thunderous blast echoed, most of its force absorbed by the thick snow and mountain rock. The ground shook violently beneath his feet. Huge clouds of snow and rock debris billowed upward from the distant hillside, triggering a miniature avalanche. Lu Yui waited quietly for more than 10 minutes to confirm the blast had not sparked a larger collapse, then restarted his vehicle and slowly drove forward. The once completely blocked entrance now featured an irregular opening roughly 3 meters in diameter, cleared clean by his precise detonation. A gust of stale, frigid air thick with machine oil and gunpowder washed out from the hole, as if he had unlocked a forgotten era sealed away for decades. Lu Yui did not rush inside blindly. First, he launched a tiny drone to scout the interior, verifying no hidden collapses or traps waited within. Only then did he slip on night vision goggles, grip his compound bow, and step cautiously into the tunnel. At the end of the passage stood an immensely heavy alloy vault door sealed for decades, a massive gash torn into its surface by the blast shockwave. Stepping through the breach, he entered a vast underground chamber. Lu Yui flipped on the tactical searchlight mounted overhead, and a blinding shaft of white light sliced through the pitch-black darkness. When the beam swept across the entire space, even Lu Yui's rock-solid composure faltered, catching his breath in shock. Row upon row of neat weapon racks draped in thick dust covers stood silent within the underground bunker, like terracotta warriors, a dormant army of steel slumbering for half a century. His breathing quickened. He stepped forward slowly, his hands trembling faintly as he reached out and ripped off the dust cover closest to him. Whoosh! The fabric slid away, revealing rows of gun barrels glinting cold metallic light beneath it. Brand new, perfectly maintained rifles shimmering with a faint cool blue sheen. Type 95 automatic rifles. Lu Yui's eyes burned red with excitement. He tossed the cover aside and tore down the next one beside it. Type 88 sniper rifles. Further along the rack, Type 92 pistols. Stacked crates of unopened ammunition lined the floors, rows of defensive grenades resting like green pineapples, body armor, night vision goggles, military combat knives. He had stumbled upon a treasure trove enough to drive any apocalypse survivor insane. "I've struck gold," Lu Yui muttered to himself, a surge of overwhelming elation flooding his chest. He wasted no time, raiding the armory like a ravenous beast let loose in a grain silo, claiming everything without restraint. He walked over to a rack lined with Type 95 rifles and swept a palm across the frame. The entire rack, along with dozens of mounted rifles, vanished in an instant, neatly stowed away in a corner of his spatial storage. He moved to the mountain of ammunition crates and waved his hand again. Hundreds upon hundreds of boxes of ammunition disappeared without a trace. Grenades, body armor, tactical gear. Nothing was left behind in his wake as he stripped the facility bare. Staring at the towering mountain of weapons rapidly piling up inside his personal space, he knew a qualitative shift had taken place in his strength. No longer merely a well-equipped hunter, he had transformed into a warlord wielding devastating firepower. From this moment onward, passive defense was no longer his only option. He now possessed the means to strike first and crush any foe that crossed his path. Half an hour later, the entire armory stood empty save for bare metal racks, every supply hauled away by him. Lu Yui did not leave immediately. He walked deep into the command room at the far rear of the bunker. The room was sparsely furnished, a single desk, several chairs, and a long-defunct radio transceiver. His gaze quickly locked onto an imposing, human-tall heavy safe tucked into the corner. He stepped forward and twisted the combination dial, but nothing moved. Looks like I'll have to use my usual method. Lu Yui pulled another small-shaped charge from his spatial storage and skillfully affixed it to the safe's locking mechanism. A far smaller detonation echoed, and the safe's metal door blew wide open. Lu Yui waved away the billowing smoke and peered inside. No stacks of gold or classified documents waited within, only a thick craft paper file folder marked top secret. Curiosity stirred in his chest, and he pulled the folder free. Breaking the seal, he drew out the documents inside. The title emblazoned across the front made his pupils contract sharply. Final report on Project Hibernation. He flipped through page after page. The contents sent a chill racing down his spine. Written in cold, dispassionate clinical language, scattered entries detailed a biological experiment codenamed Hibernation. Its ultimate objective was human genetic modification, enabling mankind to enter a semi-dormant state and survive long-term under extreme conditions such as nuclear winters or ice ages. The final pages held messy handwritten scribbles, clearly jotted by a researcher after everything spiraled out of control. Test subject S001 broke containment, breached all physical isolation barriers. The base has fallen. All security personnel infected. They are learning. The solar flu is no natural disaster. It is an aerial pathogen released by S001, engineered to reshape the global ecosystem to suit their survival needs. This is not an ice age. They are remaking this world into a divine realm for new deities. We have committed an unforgivable sin. We unlocked the gates of hell. The journal entries cut off abruptly here. Lu Yui stood frozen in place, an icy dread shooting straight from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Beneath this apocalypse lay a staggering man-made conspiracy. A mystery far larger and infinitely more terrifying than petty thugs like Scar had revealed itself to him. Loaded down with a mountain of weaponry and the world-shattering secret weighing heavy on his shoulders, he set off silently on the journey home. The return trip was no longer merely a quest for survival. It was a journey to uncover the truth behind this broken world. As Lu Yui made his quiet way back, laden with armaments and a secret capable of overturning every understanding of their reality, a tense, restless atmosphere hung heavy over the Huimin supermarket survivor camp. After discovering both the map and Xiao Jia missing, their leader Scar flew into a towering rage. He instantly suspected the omnipresent phantom enemy who had haunted them, realizing he had been played for a fool from start to finish. The stranger had used the traitor Xiao Jia to seize the map and might even have reached the mountain armory long before his own men. The realization filled him with unprecedented humiliation and fury. Damn it all. Scar kicked a nearby table over and roared at his underlings. Any word yet? A subordinate trembled and answered nervously, "Boss, the snow in the mountains is too heavy. The roads are impassable. They should be back soon, I reckon." Useless. All of you worthless trash. Bloodshot rage clouded Scar's eyes. What good am I feeding you lot for? Just then, the office door flew open. A lookout scrambled inside, tripping over his own feet. "Boss, they're back." The exploration teams returned. Scar snapped to attention, grabbing the man by the collar. "What's the situation?" It doesn't look good." Scar shoved him aside and stormed out of the office. At the camp gate, the dozen elite scouts he had pinned all his hopes on trundled in one by one, dejected and coated in snow, several bearing fresh wounds. No joy of striking treasure marked their faces, only raw terror and crushing despair, as though they had barely escaped death. Scar's heart sank to his stomach at once. Speak. What the hell happened? He charged the team leader, seizing his collar and shouting in his face. The man shook violently, tears welling in his eyes. Boss, we were too late. What do you mean too late? Spit it out clearly. The armory. The armory's been completely cleaned out. The squad leader screamed in despair. When we got there, the main gate had been blown wide open. Inside, there wasn't even a single bullet left, not to mention guns. It's cleaner than if a dog had licked every corner. What? The news struck like a bolt of lightning out of a clear sky, freezing Scar and every survivor within earshot rigid where they stood. They'd braved untold hardships, even losing 2 men along the way, only to find the hope they'd chased reduced to an empty husk? Impossible. Scar's eyes blazed blood red in an instant. He clamped a vice-like grip around the squad leader's neck and shook him violently. Did you go to the wrong place? No, we went to the right spot. The squad leader choked, barely able to draw breath. It's exactly the location marked on the map. We also spotted fresh tire tracks by the entrance. That phantom, he must have gotten there ahead of us. The phantom. It was that phantom again. Scar released his grip and stumbled backward 2 steps. A towering, burning rage at having been made a fool of drowned out the last shred of rational thought in his mind. He whipped his head around, his beast-like eyes locking onto a trembling figure huddled in the corner of the crowd. How? It's you. Scar's voice came out hoarse and ferocious as he stalked toward Hao. It had to be you. You and that bitch colluded from the inside and betrayed us. Hao's soul nearly fled his body from terror. He dropped to his knees and kowtowed frantically against the ground. It wasn't me, boss. I'm innocent. I don't know anything. That bitch stole the map and ran off. This has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with you? Scar let out a vicious snarl, grabbed Hao by his hair, and dragged him roughly to his feet. If it weren't for the 2 of you cursed omens, that phantom never would have set his sights on us. If it weren't for you too, my armory wouldn't be empty. He dumped all his failures and seething anger onto this weakest scapegoat. Men, Scar roared. Hang him up. Several enforcers surged forward at once, dragging the still begging Hao to the flagpole in the center of the square and hoisting him off the ground with rope. Boss, spare me. I truly don't know a thing. Hao writhed helplessly suspended in midair, his wails echoing across the entire camp. Scar paid him no heed. He tore a barbed whip from one subordinate's waist. Today, I'll show every single one of you what happens when you betray me. He raised the whip high overhead and brought it crashing down with full force. Crack. The whip sliced straight through Hao's clothes, carving a bone-deep bloody gash across his back. The shrill scream sent a shudder through every survivor watching. Scar did not stop. Like a rabid beast, he lashed out again and again, venting every ounce of his fury and resentment onto the pitiful man. It was not long before Hao teetered on the brink of death, barely drawing shallow gasps. All the survivors stood silent as mice, too terrified to even breathe loudly. Scar tossed the blood-soaked whip aside, panting heavily as he swept his gaze over the crowd. He knew the loss of the armory had shattered everyone's morale. If he took no decisive action, the camp would fall apart at the seams before long. Drawing a deep breath, he shouted at the top of his lungs for all to hear. Listen up, all of you. The armory's gone, that's a fact. But we know where that phantom bastard who stole our supplies lives. He's only one man. We've got more than 40 guns among us. Inside his turtle shell bunker lies everything we crave: endless food, unlimited heating fuel, medicine to keep us alive. Grab every weapon you've got this instant. At first light tomorrow, we move out. We'll crush that coward hiding from the world and take everything he owns. His words brimmed with fiery rhetoric, reigniting a spark of wild, desperate frenzy in the survivors' eyes. Hiding in the far corner of the crowd, Qinjing watched the whole scene coldly. She stared at Scar's maniacally twisted face and the greedy glint burning in the survivors' eyes, knowing a full-scale siege of Lu Yui's bunker was now inevitable. She slipped away to an unnoticed shadow, pulled out her encrypted communicator, and sent a short, urgent message. Scar has lost his mind. The armory raid failed. He's taking his rage out on Hao and rallying everyone to launch a full assault on your bunker. Estimated arrival tomorrow morning. Be careful. Lu Yui's apocalypse vehicle had barely pulled into the garage, the heavy alloy gate not yet fully closed, when the encrypted communicator on his person buzzed frantically. It was a highest priority alert from Qinjing. He opened the device and read the brief, urgent message, his face showing not the slightest surprise, only icy calm. So they've finally come. He muttered quietly, a faint, subtle smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Far from feeling fear, he even harbored a flicker of anticipation. The bunker he'd poured endless effort into building, paired with the new toys he'd hauled back from the armory, needed a real battle to prove their worth. Scar, you'd better not disappoint me. He did not pause to rest for even a moment, immediately launching the final pre-war preparations. He headed to the monitoring room and activated every surveillance camera surrounding the villa, opening a celestial eye overlooking the entire perimeter. Next, he retrieved 6 heavy metal crates from his spatial storage. When he pried the lids open, 6 menacing remote weapon stations lay inside, each assembled from automatic sensors, firearms, and ammo crates. These were ultimate killing machines he'd refitted overnight, combining weapons salvaged from the armory with electronic components he'd stockpiled long before the apocalypse. Donning his thermostatic combat suit, he braved the wind and snow to quietly install the 6 remote weapon stations at 6 critical blind spots along the inner and outer courtyard walls. Once the work was done, he returned to the bunker and seated himself at the central control console. Monitoring feeds from all 6 weapon stations lit up simultaneously on the screens. Through the central system, he commanded omnidirectional crossfire across the entire battlefield from a god's eye view. At this moment, his bunker had truly transformed into a fully armed, tooth-and-nail war machine. He waited placidly for his prey to arrive. The following dawn. Huimin's supermarket survivor camp. Scar gathered every able-bodied fighter in the camp, nearly 40 men. They clutched an eclectic array of weapons, hunting rifles collected before the apocalypse, crude spears sharpened from steel pipes, and more. Every face bore a tangled mix of greed, terror, and wild madness. Brothers. Scar stood atop a broken truck to deliver his final pre-battle rallying speech. I know fear gnaws at you, but think about what's waiting inside that turtle shell. Endless grain, unlimited liquor, warm beds, clean women. Storm that bunker, and all of it will be ours. That bastard's alone. There's over 40 of us. We could drown him just spitting at him. Now get your heads in the game. Scar drew his pistol, fired a shot into the air, and roared. Move out. The 40-odd survivors let loose bestial howls, surging forth as a massive mob toward Lu Yuyi's bunker. An hour later, the ragtag army reached their destination. They stared at the villa, unnervingly quiet amid the frozen wasteland with warm lights glowing inside, greedy hunger blazing in every pair of eyes. This is the place, boss, a subordinate said excitedly to Scar. Damn, this bastard's living like royalty. Scar spat on the snow, jealousy and vicious malice hardening his gaze. Pass my order. The truck drivers floor the gas and ram that flimsy gate straight down. The rest of you, get ready to climb the walls. First man inside gets 10 cans of food as a reward. Roar. The survivors' bloodlust ignited instantly. The beat-up truck repurposed as a battering ram let out a raspy engine roar, belching black smoke as it careened full speed toward the villa's alloy gate. Yet split seconds before impact. Zap. A blinding bolt of vivid blue electricity erupted from the high-voltage power grid lining the wall's top. The truck's entire front cab was instantly engulfed by tens of thousands of volts of electricity. The tires reeked of burning rubber, and the whole engine block glowed red-hot in an instant. The driver trapped in the cab did not even have time to scream. The powerful current reduced him to a charred corpse on the spot. The truck stalled dead short as if slamming into an invisible barrier, halted right before the gate. Every survivor froze, horrified by the nightmarish sight. It's an electric fence, someone shrieked in terror. Quit cowering. Scar snapped back to his senses and roared. Pile corpses and timber to drain its power. The rest of you, build ladders and climb over. But what awaited them was a second massacre. The moment several survivors propped up makeshift wooden ladders to scale the walls. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. The built-in automatic nail gun turrets and Lu Yuyi's newly installed remote weapon stations opened fire in unison. A dense crossfire of steel nails and bullets swept outward like the Grim Reaper's scythe, turning the area outside the walls into a no-man's land where no life could survive. The men mid-climb on the ladders were riddled with holes instantly, screaming as they tumbled back down into the snow. Wave after wave of charging survivors collapsed in pools of blood. For the besiegers, this assault was pure hell. For Lu Yuyi, it was nothing more than a one-sided slaughter he oversaw from the monitoring room with only a few taps of his fingers. Boss, we can't break through. Their firepower is too heavy. A survivor scrambled over to Scar, trembling with fright. Useless trash. Scar kicked him aside, his eyes bloodshot. Watching his men dwindle away before his eyes, his rage and despair hit a fever pitch. Keep charging. Use human bodies as cover. I refuse to believe his ammo's endless, he shrieked maniacally. Driven by Scar's threats, the survivors had no choice but to press forward in suicidal rushes, hiding behind the corpses of their fallen comrades. After suffering catastrophic losses of nearly half their number, their human wave tactics finally exhausted the automatic emplacement's ammo, breaching the outer courtyard walls. They thought victory was within reach, cheering wildly as they trampled over the bodies of their fallen kin and prepared to storm the main villa building. Without a sound, the massive firing port built into the second-floor study, facing directly onto the courtyard, slid open slowly. A menacing heavy machine gun with a thick barrel reeking of death was steadily pushed out from the shadows. Its cold maw, gaping like an abyss, locked onto the cheering survivors down below. The cold barrel, a gaping maw from the depths of the abyss, aimed straight at the survivors celebrating their shallow victory in the courtyard below. The wild elation, still plastered across the faces of those who'd broken through the first line of defenses, froze solid the instant they laid eyes on the vicious gun barrel protruding from the window. What the hell is that? One survivor stammered, his voice shaking. Scar caught sight of the heavy machine gun too. His bloodshot, maniacally dilated pupils contracted sharply, and a primal, soul-deep terror clamped tight around his heart. Having navigated the criminal underworld for years before the apocalypse, he understood better than anyone what this weapon signified. This was not merely a gun. It was death itself. Run. Run for your lives. He let out the most shrill, despairing scream of his life. But it was already far too late. Lu Yui sat before the central control console, staring coldly through the scope at the panicking crowd scattering like headless flies down below. His finger gently pressed the firing switch. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. Tongues of flame erupted from the heavy machine gun like an enraged dragon awakened from hell. A relentless torrent of bullets carrying devastating kinetic energy tore through the air, rending the bodies of every survivor trapped in the courtyard without mercy. Blood and flesh sprayed everywhere. Screams, the crunch of splintering bone, the wet thud of bullets piercing flesh, and the deep, rhythmic roar of the machine gun wove together to form the cruelest, bloodiest symphony of death imaginable. Their so-called cover, abandoned vehicles and collapsed walls, crumbled like flimsy paper before this steel deluge, torn to shreds in an instant. Crushed by overwhelming firepower, the survivors completely lost their wits. They wailed and shrieked, scrambling desperately to flee the courtyard that had turned into a meat grinder. Yet where could they possibly run? This siege was hell for them. For Lu Yui, it was nothing more than an execution whose outcome had long been sealed. The gunfire fell silent after mere dozens of seconds. Not a single person remained standing in the courtyard. Limbs, mangled organs, and scalding blood stained the pure white snow a ghastly, dark crimson. A thick, nauseating metallic stench of blood billowed into the frigid air. By sheer luck, Scar had taken cover behind a truck wreckage and escaped being blown to bits in the initial volley, though a stray bullet had torn through his leg, leaving him bleeding profusely. Staring at the living hell laid out before him, at the more than 40 men he'd led reduced to piles of mangled flesh in the blink of an eye, his mind shattered completely. At that moment, static crackled over the bunker's external public address system. Then that devilishly cold, emotionless voice boomed across the entire battlefield. A worthless leader drags all his followers to ruin. Kill Scar and you may live. The man named How must die. Those words acted like a fatal spell, the final straw that broke the last thread of resolve holding the surviving men together. Several gravely wounded survivors clinging to life on the ground ignited with a ravenous urge to survive the second they heard, "You may live." As one, they fixed hate-filled gazes on Scar, the man responsible for dragging every last one of them to their doom. "It's you, Scar. You brought this ruin down on us." A survivor with a shattered leg dragged himself over, snatched a pistol off the snow, and aimed it straight at Scar. "That's right. Kill him. We'll survive if he's dead." Driven to desperation by the fight for survival, the men turned their guns and blades against the leader they had once sworn to obey unto death. The camp fractured apart from within, irreparably. "No, don't." Scar screamed in utter despair as the men who had once bowed to his every whim lunged at him like vengeful ghosts. On the other side, Hao, already half paralyzed with terror, lost every shred of composure upon hearing the death sentence that he must die. Seizing the moment when everyone's attention was fixed on Scar, he scrambled and crawled, spinning around to bolt for his life. He had to escape this hell. Yet he barely made it a few paces. A sharp, fatal gunshot, distinct from the deep roar of the heavy machine gun, rang out from the villa's top floor. Bang! A sniper bullet, spinning at invisible blistering speed, blew Hao's skull wide open without the slightest chance of evasion. His body stiffened violently. The last flicker of light faded entirely from his fear-widened eyes. He crashed forward heavily into the snow. Up on the villa's rooftop, Liu Yi slowly lowered his Type 88 sniper rifle. Through the 8-power scope, he watched Hao's twitching corpse, eyes frozen open in eternal terror. The heart tormented by hatred and agony across 2 lifetimes finally settled into quiet stillness. He had avenged the wrongs of his past life at last. Instead of the wild elation and satisfaction he had imagined he would feel, only a hollow, deathly calm washed over him. He knew that from this moment forward, he had severed all ties with his weak, pitiful former self once and for all.